Good afternoon and good evening, and welcome to this webinar on how to score 760 on the GMAT. We also call this webinar GMAT Strategy Webinar. In this webinar, we're going to do a few things. We're going to look at, hey, why should you go for that high GMAT score? Because it does require a lot of effort. So what's that ROI, that high GMAT score? Then we'll go into what does the GMAT actually test? I mean, if you want to go to get to a score of 730, 740, 750, or 760, or even higher, you've got to understand how to get there. And to do that, you've got to figure out what is the GMAT all about. Then we're going to go into how do you build a personalized study plan, and why is building a personalized study plan important if you're going to get to that high GMAT score. And then towards the end, we're going to look at, and when I say towards the end, so these three things would be the first about 50 minutes of the webinar. Then we're going to look at how should you study to get to that score, because not everyone who puts in the effort gets to that score. Only 1% of students get to a 760 score. So we're going to look at case studies to see what is it that they do differently to get there. Now, overall, during this webinar, I'm going to tell you many things which, even though they're very logical, you're going to find that not many of you knew about those things or follow those things during your preparation. Also, I'm going to be presenting a lot of data during this webinar, so make sure you have a pen and paper ready so that you can write down the key points so that you can follow along. But before that, let's kind of get to know you guys a bit better. So I want to figure out the makeup of this group. What is your target GMAT score? Okay, let's get a few more responses. The question is, what is your target GMAT score? I have about close to 70 responses, but 68 responses. I think let's get to 80. I have about 112 students on the webinar right now. 74, 75. Let's get to 80 responses, guys, and then let's also figure out where is it that you guys currently are. And the current GMAT score should be based on a mock test or essentially an actual attempt. If you've taken one, what's your current GMAT score? Okay, based on the data that I have, let's just take a look at this. Pretty much everyone who's here is aiming for a score of 700 or higher. You have 30% of the folks who are in that 710, 720 bracket. You have the biggest group, which is in the 730 to 750, which is great. And then we have about 23% of folks who are in that 760 or higher bracket. And with regards to the current GMAT scores, that's where you see the distributions all over the place. Starting with the biggest group, that's in the 560 to 600 bracket. And then we have a fairly sizable number of folks in the 400 to 500, 500 to 510 to 550, as well as the 610 to 650 bracket. We have a few folks who are almost there and a few folks who are quite close. So folks in the 660 to 700 bracket, as well as 710 to 720, and essentially fairly big chunk of you don't know your current score. So I'm assuming that you haven't taken a mock test as of yet. So that's wonderful. Good data. So overall, very similar target scores, or as I'd say, more tightly banded target scores, and a very good distribution of the starting score. So usually when you have a scenario like this, it leads to a fun webinar. It leads to lots and lots of perspectives coming in, and essentially what you're going to really see is that areas that you struggle with and are similar to what others struggle in, and then usually and some of the areas that you struggle in, others have been able to overcome. You're going to figure out how they've been able to do that. What's the logic behind that? With regards to when do people have their GMAT scores, again, about 78% of the class has a month or more. About 23-24% of the people who are in the next 30 days. So again, hopefully you guys are a lot closer to your GMAT score than if you have your test in the next 30 days than those who have more than 30 days before the test. Now, even though this is a GMAT strategy webinar, we do solve a couple of questions in this webinar, and to make sure that you're well prepared, we do send these video lessons your way. These video lessons are a part of your free trial. Make sure you go through them post this webinar to get the most out of this webinar. Also, we have some upcoming free webinars. We have a free webinar on how to ace GMAT sentence correction. That is next Saturday, a week from now, probably our most popular webinar. In this webinar, we look at how you can ace GMAT sentence correction by simply focusing on meaning and logic. And then we have a free webinar on GMAT number properties, which is next Sunday, October 13th. Again, very similar theme. Instead of sentence correction, we focus on number properties. So if you want to get to that 90th percentile in sentence correction, or if you're aiming for a Q50 in arithmetic, then definitely attend the corresponding webinars. With that, let's go to the webinar pane. The screen will have changed for you, or it will be in the process of changing for you. Once the screen changes, you will be seeing you'll be seeing the slide that says, how do you score 95th percentile or better on the GMAT? Select yes if you can see that slide right now. Perfect. It seems pretty much everyone can. If you cannot, you probably are on a slower connection. Just join again using the same link. The problem will sort out by itself. Okay, at this point, let me also introduce my team. My name is Rajat Sadana. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be your main host today. Along with me, I have Payal Tandon, who's the other co-founder, and she's going to be your co-host today. And supporting us on this webinar, we have Sandeep, who's a GMAT strategy expert, and he's going to make sure that your questions are answered during this webinar. What you currently see is what we call as the presentation pod, or the presentation view. You see a presentation front and center, and you see a Q&A pod, or a question and answer pod right below that. If you have a question during this webinar, put that question in the Q&A pod. Having said that, my request would be to make sure that your questions are specific to what's being talked about. If you have questions that are a bit more personal, I would request that you reserve them towards the end. That way, we can get good insights from you and give you an answer that actually would be very specific to your situation and something that you can use. Okay, so how do you score 75th percentile or better on the GMAT? And again, a lot of the content in this webinar is designed for people who are aiming to get to a score of 730 or higher. But so if you are in that bracket, you're going to find this super useful. You're going to find that these are direct answers to the questions, many questions that you've been asking. But if you're aiming for a score of 700, the principles that we talk about in this webinar, they still apply. So let's go over them. So let's talk about the first thing. Why should you aim for that score of 730 or higher? Or in other words, why is that score of 700 not enough today? Let me ask in a poll question. Why is that score of 700 not enough today? Okay. Very nice. I have about 15 answers right now. Really, really good answers. 30 answers. Let's get to about 35 answers before I broadcast results. 29. Let's get to a few more. 31, 33. And guys, you can't see your responses because of not sharing those, but now we have 35. Let's broadcast the results. And what you really see is, high requirements by universities. It helps in interviews, scholarships, increase in applications. So some really, really good reasons that you have. And that's what happens when you have a big group. Overall, you pool in, you get to your responses, and we all collectively are smarter as a group. So let's talk about this. So one big reason. So you've talked about 2 out of 3 reasons over here. You've kind of missed out on one big reason, probably the biggest reason over here. And the reason why I want to focus on this is because having coached upwards of 40,000 students, I, I still find there are many people who are confused. Hey, is a 700 enough, or why is it not enough? Should I still spend time and energy to get to that 730 or a 740 score? And then the reason, it's a genuine question. Why? Because it's hard to get to those scores. It requires a lot of effort, especially if you're a working professional. Uh, uh, and because you're working full time, you want to do your application, and an application is finishing doing justice to your application is fairly difficult as well. But essentially, I want to make sure that you have an absolutely clear understanding as to why should you get to that 730 score, and there are three reasons why you should do this. If you're aiming, the first one is if you're aiming for a top school, then top business schools now almost require that you go to get to a score of 730. And I'm going to really explain this with data. As I said early on in this webinar, at e-GMAT, we are sticklers for data. So yes, you can really take the conclusion, but you should also understand the data behind it, because I think it'll enrich your understanding of why they or how they now require, and when you're studying, it'll motivate you even more. The second piece which is there is, B schools today in the US offer about $350 million worth of what I call as merit-based scholarships. And more than 50% of this money, in my opinion, goes to people who get to that score of 730. And then where's this opinion formed from? I'm going to talk about that. And then the third reason, so first 1 and 2, you guys listed out. The third reason is, when you look at the compensations today, the delta in compensation between the top school, a tier 1 versus a tier 2 school, what you're going to find is that's the highest that it has ever been. And when you extrapolate it over a 10-year period, you're going to find that delta results in a fairly significant amount. So let's kind of delve into these 3 points. But overall, the takeaway that I want to make sure you have is that the difference between these 30 points, 700 and 730, or these 50 points, 700 versus 750, is easily, and I'm saying the word easily, $500,000. Let's kind of look at data behind this. So here's some data. So what this table really shows is that the median score requirements in the year 2004 and the median score requirements in the year 2018 were 2014 versus 2018, and 2018 is when we have the latest data. We are in the year 2019 R2, so schools haven't released the data for the year 2019. And what you really see is that scores have inched towards that 730 mark. Now remember this, in this table there's no Harvard, there's no Stanford, there's no GSB Chicago, schools that already have these their median scores around that 730 mark or so. Essentially half the class at top schools, top 12, top 15 schools, now gets to that score of has that score of 730. When you look at 728, 727, 732, 726, you're talking about a median score of 730. If you are an international student, the requirements are a lot more stringent. And this is a trend that has been moving in this direction for the last 5 years. In fact, according to Poets and Quants, 23 of the top 25 schools, the median scores at 23 out of top 25 schools have gone up during this 5-year span. At certain schools, 80% of the admitted class has GMAT scores of 700 or higher, which means, hey, MIT, for example, if they have a class of approximately 400 students, 80% of them are 700 or higher. Those 20%, very special cases, by the way. And this is despite the fact that during this time, there has been a 15% decline in the GMAT test taking population. So when you look at the number of people who took the GMAT in the year 2014 versus that number that took the GMAT in the year 2018. And so essentially, why is that important? Because in the year 2018, there were fewer people who scored a 730 than did in the year 2014. Despite that, the median scores in the year 2018 are higher. Okay. This was a quote from an article that Mark Either, who's the managing editor at Poets and Quants, said the bottom line remains that only the best of the best have a shot at getting into any of these schools. And he's referring to the top few schools. But the thing which is there is, Vedant has a really great question. He says if a person's got 720 in the year 2014, his score would be above the median. If he applies in 2018 to the same score, will he face a problem? Now, again, Vedant, would you settle for the salary that people got out of the school that you get admission into in the year 2014? No. So if you're applying in the year 2018, you have to abide by the 2018 requirements, regardless of when you took the GMAT. So, and this trend doesn't stop at the top 25. It continues actually beyond the top 25 schools. So again, this data is from the same Poets and Quants article. You can really see the trend going on in a number of tier 2 schools over here. So these ones have notched big increases. These ones are tier 2 schools, or what I call as schools that are not in your typical top 25, and you can see big GMAT increases over there. Okay, now this is statistical data. I'm going to now show some anecdotal data of students where people did not get into B schools with a lower GMAT score, improved their GMAT, got into B schools. The first student is Nishant. Is probably written the most popular debrief on GMAT Club that has been there that over the last 2 years. I think his debrief has about 250 kudos overall. So in his first attempt, he got a 690, or actually in his third attempt, he got a 690. He was pretty much rejected by every school that he applied to. So he was rejected by Tuck, he was rejected by Penn State, Broad, Rotman. Then within 3 months, he got a 740. He applied to schools. He got a full fellowship from Ohio Fisher, and he received an admit from Columbia. And again, because he got a rejection, he actually asked for feedback from all the schools that rejected him. Tuck and Smeal gave him feedback, and they said, we like your profile, but your GMAT score is bad. There's no change in profile. This is 3 months overall. Here's another example of another student, Pravi. She applied to many schools with a 680. She didn't receive rejections. She didn't receive invites. She improved her GMAT score to 740, and she received interview invites within hours. Within hours, not days, but hours of sending her updated score. She was admitted to Georgetown with an $80,000 worth of scholarship, Anderson with $40,000 of scholarship, and as well as Kellogg. She is now in her second year at Kellogg. Again, same round, updated GMAT scores. And this third example is Krishnakant, very interesting example. Applied to B schools again in round 2 with a score of 680. He was rejected by the schools that you see over here, which is Simon, Foster, Rotman, and McGill. Again, relatively good ranked schools rejected him. But as soon as he improved his GMAT score to 720, he started receiving full fellowships. He got 3 full fellowships: Georgia Tech, WP Carey, and Texas A&M. Okay, so again, anecdotal data that tells you, the value of GMAT score when it comes to getting admission into a top B school. Bottom line is, your GMAT score today is way more important than it has ever been. It was always important. Today, it's even more important. Okay. The second reason, scholarship. I mean, I took the GMAT twice. I took the GMAT long back in the year 2003. The only reason I took it twice was because I wanted to get a scholarship. I didn't want to pay for my MBA education. And the good thing was I didn't pay a single penny for my MBA education. But that was just me as an anecdotal case. Let's kind of look at some more data. So, how many of you knew that B schools in the US give out $350 million in aid every year? Let me just put in a yes/no poll. It's a lot of money. Harvard alone gives out, I think, about $38 million. So if you go to our blog, we actually list down numbers by various schools. You can really see how much financial aid does a B school provide. Um, and these are merit-based scholarships. So essentially, they are decided based on your academic achievements, your GMAT scores, as well as how much they like. So B schools gave out about $350 million, and this number has been all-time high uh, 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 in the year 2018. I think in the year 2019, it expected to go even higher. Now, who gets this money? Based on my estimates and having worked with 40,000 plus students, 55% of them, of this amount, goes to the 6,000 students who have a score of 740 or higher. 80% of that goes to about 20,000 students who get to a score of 710 or higher. So what does this translate into? About $40,000 of average scholarship amount per year. This is an annual scholarship amount if you are a score of if you have a score of 740 or higher. And what does the scholarship amount depend on? Primarily two factors. One is your GMAT score. Second is what, and I asked B schools when I spoke with admission directors a couple of years ago at a conference which they organized for us. They said two things. One is your GMAT score. Second is your likability during the interview. That decides the scholarship. Whether you get a scholarship, how much scholarship you get. We already saw some data. I'm going to just repeat some of that data, but also I'm going to show some fresh anecdotal data. So here's Mansi, who received admits from Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, Kellogg, and NCERT. She received $90,000 of total scholarship money from Harvard. She's actually studying at Harvard right now. And again, I have links to their interviews. You can actually click on the YouTube icon and watch her interview. Her interview is also on our YouTube channel. Then you have Victor, who scored a 770. All of these are our students. Received $142,000 worth of scholarship from Ross as well as Keenan Flagler. That's like full fellowship, which means he got an offer to not pay a single penny, and he had a GMAT score of 770. The third person is Kong Bui. He received $144,000 worth of scholarship from actually 5 different schools, including Ohio Fisher. Ohio Fisher is where he's studying right now. Again, he had a GMAT score of 760. Now, the nice thing about his scholarship was it wasn't just a scholarship, it also included $1,700 per month of stipend. So he was actually getting paid to study at Ohio. He just graduated right now, and he's gotten a wonderful job. And he's actually, I think he's started his job as well. And again, you've already seen this data over here, essentially. So these are total scholarship amounts over 2 years. Nishant, 125 grand, Pravi, 80,000, and Krishnakant, 124 grand of scholarship money. And you can see the GMAT scores. You can also click on the corresponding icons to watch these interviews. Here's a quote that John Fuller, who's the former admissions director, at Ross, who's actually, I think, a consultant with MBA Mission, he said, someone with a 770 GMAT is much more likely to get financial reward than someone with a 670. It can be much more likely, and remember, he was the admission director, he has to be very careful. It can be much more likely for that business school to want to buy that high GMAT score. Okay. So Payal will actually share these links. So admission to top B schools, you need that score of 730 or higher. Scholarship, I think for me, the biggest reason was scholarship when I was applying, because, hey, you get an admission into a top B school, then you start worrying about how am I going to pay for this education? And if you have a fellowship and that burden right then and there, that's year zero money that you get, that is such a relief. But then this part over here, I think, is probably the biggest reason. It's something that most people actually forget because they don't really worry about it. Most of them worry about just getting into a B school. But the difference in total earnings, if you get into a tier 1 versus a tier 2 school, is the highest that it has ever been. And to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an example of two schools that are very close to my heart. Babson, the school that I went to, and MIT, which is a school which is right there. And the reason why I'm taking these two schools, it's very easy to take a school in Silicon Valley where salaries are sky high because of the sky high cost of living, and take another school over here in Arizona where salaries are not that high. I by the way live in Phoenix, Arizona, but the cost of living is fairly low as well, and that won't be a fair comparison. But Babson and MIT, two schools which are there in the same region, they're 20 miles apart from one another. People who graduate from these schools, most of them are employed within the same region. And in fact, you can actually take classes at one school or the other. So if you're studying at Babson, you can take a few courses at MIT and vice versa. So when you think about some data from these, so the graduating class of 2018, the median base salary at Babson was 96,000 and change. The same for MIT was 135,000. Now, if you add the average sign-in bonus, that's about that difference even goes up. So overall, in the year one total compensation, you're looking at about a 50 grand difference or a 60 grand difference. But even if you really say, hey, the average difference is 45 grand because hey, you don't get this average bonus every year. Okay, so even then, and if you multiply it across 10 years, you're looking at a compensation difference of $450,000 just by this. And again, these are two individuals living in the same geographic area, having a very similar cost of living overall. So this is money in your pocket. So again, getting that score of 730 or higher is hard, but it pays, and it pays big time. And again, I'm not even touching those points where people say, hey, if you want to get to if you want a job in consulting or corporate strategy, you've got to get a higher GMAT score. Let's not even go there. Just by looking at this, you're looking at $500,000 of ROI for these 30 points or so. Okay. And this is hard. I mean, getting to 730 is not easy. And most test prep companies would say it is easy. It is not easy. You will have to work hard. You will struggle. But that 2 months of struggle, additional struggle, if that all, or a month of additional struggle is worth this amount. Trust me, not many people work for a month and earn this much. Now, I'm not saying that just getting a score of 730 will get you into MIT. I also want to make sure that you understand that. But if you have a decent profile, if you have a reasonable profile, make sure you get to that high GMAT score. If you don't have a reasonable profile, get a better GMAT score. Make GMAT your strength. But if you have a reasonable profile, get a high GMAT score. Why? Because you owe it to yourself. You owe it to really live up to your full potential. Okay, so now that we know the ROI of the GMAT, let's kind of talk about how do you ace the GMAT, and let me ask this question. How do you ace the GMAT? What do you think is the key to acing the GMAT? I have about 150 students here. Let's get responses. I'm going to wait for about 50 responses, and I'm going to share results. That way we know that your responses have not been biased by what others have written. The question is, how do you ace the GMAT? And again, I have 15 responses so far. 26 responses, 27. Let's see if we can get to 50. The question is, how do you ace the GMAT? "36 responses, 37, 51. Wonderful. All right, I'm going to give you about 30 to 40 seconds to look at this data, to look at the responses. Um, Reading and consistent practice, lots and lots of practice, dedication, planning, and execution. Strong concepts coupled with perfect exam mindset. Okay. Focused preparation with the right strategies. Practice, review, and practice some more. Fix your mistakes and learn from them. So all of them good answers. Good answers. I'm going to and read these answers, keep them in your mind. I'm going to ask this question again towards the end after this webinar, and then I want to really see how these answers are different. At the end of this webinar, let's talk about how I think you ace the GMAT. Acing the GMAT is about building ability. GMAT is like a skill. You have to build your GMAT skill, and the way you build your GMAT skill is by building ability. And I want to also mention a few other things that you see at the bottom. You know, a lot of people when they worry about when they think about the GMAT, they worry about timing. They worry about exam strategy. They worry about, hey, which is this an easy question or is this a difficult question? They worry about lasting a 3.5 or 3 hour long exam. I think these things are important, but when you look at the comparative importance to building strategy, what you're going to find is that this is where 80% of the meat is. This is where together all of these combined is about 20%. So if you want to worry about how do you ace the GMAT, worry about building ability, because there's a reason why only 6% of the people get to a score of 730 or higher. The remaining study just as hard, they just don't build ability. They worry about these things at the bottom, which is, hey, timing, exam strategy, and so on and so forth. But because they don't build ability, they don't get to those scores. So let's talk about this and say, why is ability and so important when it comes to the GMAT? And an ability in the context of GMAT is not an abstract construct. It is a very specific, very quantified concept. So we're going to really look at what ability is, and we're going to quantify the same as well. Okay. So to do that, I'm just going to start with a very, very simple thing, a simulation of how a computer adaptive test works. Why? Because essentially, pretty much all of us know GMAT's a computer adaptive test. So what's accuracy? I'm going to focus on two metrics over here. Accuracy is, when you take a test, how many questions have you gotten right? How many questions have you gotten wrong? If you take a quiz with 10 questions, 8 out of 10 is 80% accuracy. Ability is how good are you compared to others. So again, same quiz, 8 out of 10, 80% accuracy. But when 1,000 people take that quiz, how many of them get to 8 questions or more? If at 8 out of 10, you could be looking at 95th percentile ability, or you could be looking at 50th percentile ability with the same accuracy. And that's something that I want to make sure that you understand. Ability in the context of the GMAT is a very, very quantifiable concept. And why is it quantifiable? Why does the GMAT really focus so much on ability, and where does data tell us? I'm going to demonstrate that. So what you see is it's a simulation of an adaptive test. And this is a general purpose adaptive test. The GMAT follows a similar principle. The algorithm is a bit more sophisticated, but again, to understand how an adaptive test works, this is a very, very simple simulation. It will help you understand when you get a certain score, why do you get a certain score. So what you see is it's a simulation over 5 questions. So we actually end the test over here. On the x-axis, you see question numbers. On the y-axis, what you see is the difficulty level of question. So the higher you go on y-axis, the more difficult a question becomes. So we're going to simulate 2 students. Student 1, or case 1 as we call him over here, gets the first question right. Then he gets the second question. And remember, as you go from 1 to 2, the blue line is moving up. The second question is of a higher difficulty level. The higher you go on a y-axis, the more difficult a question becomes. He gets that right as well. then the third question is of a much higher difficulty level. He gets that wrong. Consequently, the fourth question is of a difficulty level that is between question numbers, let me actually make the thickness slightly, 2 and 3. So if you draw straight lines from question 3 and question 2, you're going to find that question number 4 is between these two. Let me actually select this. Okay. Gets the fourth question right, gets the fifth question consequently of a slightly higher difficulty level, gets that wrong. So essentially what you see over here is when I answer a question correctly, again, this is a simplistic algorithm, but it explains the principle. If you answer a question correctly, the difficulty level goes up. If you make a mistake, the difficulty level adjusts slightly to make and it keeps on adjusting till the test narrows it down to your difficulty level. Student 2 over here gets the first question, again, similar difficulty, median difficulty. The first question is always around the median difficulty level, gets that wrong, gets the second question, much easier, gets that right, gets the third question, slightly more difficult, gets that wrong, gets the fourth question, which is of a lower difficulty level, gets that right, gets the fifth question right as well. Okay, now it is clear that the two things which are clear if you just do the math. Student 1 and student 2, identical accuracy. Yet, student 1, if I were to end the test at this point, actually, let me put a line. If I were to end the test at this point, student 1 will have higher GMAT score. Why is that? Why would student 1 have higher GMAT score? Okay, let's get your responses. Let's get a few more responses. I have 15 responses. 20, almost 20 responses. Okay, I'm going to share it at about 25. Why did student 1 receive a higher GMAT score? But 27 responses. But 5 or 6 are really good. Anyone who said because he solved more difficult questions correctly is absolutely right. The reason why student 1 gets a higher GMAT score, despite the fact that both of them answered 3 out of 5 questions correctly, is because he answered, the question that he answered correctly were more difficult questions. In fact, student 1 got each of his 5 questions were either at the average difficulty level or above the average difficulty level. Student 2 got only this first question, which was at the average difficulty level. You can see identical accuracy. In fact, if I were to stop the test at question number 5, student 1 would be about 25 percentile points higher than student 2. Okay. Now, let me ask this. Was student 2 even served difficult questions? No, he wasn't. You can really see this is this average difficulty level over here. Let me just remove this. You can see this is this average difficulty level line over here. And student 2, every question that student 2 received was actually either at, which was the first question, or below that average difficulty level line. So when it comes to acing the GMAT, the first challenge is to make sure that the test serves difficult questions to you. Why? Because difficult questions carry many more points than easy questions. And the second challenge is to answer them correctly. Those are the two things. And how do you get the test to serve difficult questions to you? By building ability. How do you answer them correctly? By building ability. There's no timing here yet. Okay, so this is just a principle. Let me just actually now move on to the real thing, the actual GMAT. What you see over here is GMAT prep attempts of the old GMAT prep, which used to give us really good data. We're talking about the year 2017, and I still use these examples because the amount of data that the old GMAT prep application gave you was really rich. And the current algorithm is still the same. The principles still remain the same. So you see the verbal section, you see 41 questions, which is what the verbal section used to have. Now, it's two different students their respective attempts, what you'd really find over here is that these students are fairly identical. The rectangles that you see over here are the rectangles where they've made a mistake. And what you're going to find is that barring the first two questions, which is where student 2 made a mistake, there's very little to choose between these two. In the questions 11 to 41, both of them have made 9 mistakes. The mistakes are more or less evenly spaced, essentially, so they seem fairly identical. But the first two questions is where this guy got wrong. And when you look at their actual verbal scores, which the test gave this particular student, student 2 got a score of V32, student 1 got a score of V43. V43 is 97th percentile. Considering that about 200,000 students estimated took the test in the year 2018, 97th percentile gives the V43 guy a 6,000 rank. 65th percentile gives this guy a 70,000 rank. If you focused just on accuracy, you'd say, hey man, 2 questions wrong and my rank goes down by 64,000 students. That seems too harsh. How many of you are thinking that way? How many of you are thinking that way? 2 questions and the rank goes down by 60,000 students. What is the big assumption that you're making when you're thinking that way? And frankly, what's interesting is I've asked this question probably 50 times to about 12,000 students, and then very few students really say, man, I can make 9 mistakes, still get a 97 percentile. No one seems to rejoice that. Everyone seems to say, hey, the difference in 2 more mistakes and I get down to 65th percentile. Yes, one of the biggest assumptions is that the difficulty level is identical. Is that a good assumption on a computer adaptive test such as the GMAT? Is that a good assumption? No, it isn't. And when you start to feel worried about this accuracy, put that difficulty level in context. Why? Because GMAT's not a test of accuracy. Let's kind of simulate this, try and simulate this on the simple model that we had earlier. I'm going to go and worry about student 2, and let me just clean this up right now. Remember, student 2 got the first 2 questions wrong. Now let's get the right annotation. He got the first question, it was a median difficulty level. He got that wrong. He got the second question, which is probably a 30th percentile level. He got that wrong as well. Now, tell me one thing. And if you're someone who's really good in quant, especially this is a question for you. What is the probability that a 90th percentile student gets a 50th percentile question and a 30th percentile question wrong, one after the other? What is that probability? Very low. How low? It's less than 1 in 10,000 that a 90th percentile student would actually do that. Less than 1 in 10,000. That joint probability is that low. So at this point in time, the test is actually fairly accurate in estimating that student 2 is not a fairly smart guy. He's not a 90th percentile guy. So the next question that he gets, question number 4, is he gets question number 3, which is 15th percentile level, gets that right. Question number 4 is 20th percentile level. Question number 5 is 30th percentile level. 6 is 40th. He starts to go above that median percentile level at question number 7 and 8, whereas student 1 was already answering difficult questions by the time he reached question number 5 or so, and he continued to do that, answer them correctly over here. Now, what's the difference in points between an easy question and a hard question? How many more points does a hard question carry in comparison to an easy question? How many more? What's the difference? Or in terms of times, let's call it this way. A hard question carries 3x as many points as an easy question. Or 12 versus 4, yeah, that's 3x as many. And if you solve questions on a Scholarium platform, you get those insights over here. So if this guy was already solving hard questions, you can really see how much his weighted score was a lot higher internally. And then we're going to really see what that weighted score was. But again, when you guys looked at these two students, you saw a difference in accuracy of 2 questions, but you saw a huge difference in ability. The GMAT doesn't care about accuracy. What the GMAT cares about is ability. So what the GMAT looks at when looks at these students, it estimates these ability levels. And when you look at these estimates of ability, and you compare student 1 and student 2, do they look reasonably different to you? Student 1 has much higher abilities in SCCR and RC. Student 2, when you compare it to student 2. And then, when you look at those numbers, does the segregation seem justified? Does it seem justified, right? So then, if GMAT measures ability, let's kind of understand what abilities does the test actually measure. And it's something that, it's been clear to us for a very long time. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to quantify those abilities. So you have the GMAT score out of 800, and we're just going to focus on that score out of 800. I'm not going to focus on AW. I'm not going to focus on IR. Okay. So you get a quant and verbal score when it comes to your GMAT score. Now, this quant score is composed of 2 different subsectional abilities. I want to make sure you understand this terminology. This is section, quant is a section, verbal is a section, arithmetic and algebra geometry, they are subsections over here. Similarly, on the verbal side, SCCR and RC, sentence correction, critical reasoning and reading comprehension, are subsections, or SSs as we call them. And essentially, GMAT measures ability at this subsectional level. Rashmi says, aren't quant and verbal scores out of 51? No, 51 is the highest score that you can get. They are out of 60. So the scale that the GMAT has allocated to them is the max scale of 51. It doesn't give anyone more than 51. But there is a possibility in the future where it can expand that scale to 60. So those are scores out of 60. Okay. So good question, Rashmi. All right. So how does scoring work on the GMAT? So when we worry about this, we only worry about this score, but essentially we should worry about these scores because that's how scoring works on the GMAT. So on the test, you have 5 independent engines that calculate these key abilities independently. So what are these abilities? Critical reasoning, reading comprehension, sentence correction, arithmetic and algebra geometry. Combining these abilities, you get a quant score and a verbal score. So, I mean, as the chart says over here, these two. Let me just move on. So, arithmetic and algebra lead to your quant score. SCCR and RC, independently calculated, lead to your verbal score. Okay. So, is the screen clear now? Let's see, those who are saying no, are they primarily saying because you are on a cell phone, you're using a mobile device? To me, it's absolutely clear. Okay, if you're saying no, just say, tell me the device which you are. If you're on a Windows or on a laptop, Windows laptop, only checkbox is showing up on the Mac. Okay, guys, my apologies.
What I recommend is always join using Chrome. The screen should be absolutely clear. And did it just start happening now? Okay, I would just recommend join again if because we have about 3 folks. So join again. Usually when you reset the connection, things should go back. Okay, I'm actually going to go back once again. I'm going to go beyond this. Is this clear? Is this clear? All right. So I think I know what's happening. You guys are fine. No, you guys are fine. I think things are going to go bad again for about 2 slides, and then we'll be fine again. So my apologies. The reason why this is happening is because this particular graphic that you're not able to see, for those of you, this is a PowerPoint graphic, and so that's why this is happening again. So it's going to happen for 2 slides only, and I think you'll be fine again after that. Okay, so you have these 5 independent engines, and one each in SCCRRC, and then arithmetic and algebra geometry, and combining the performance of these 5 abilities, you get the scores out of verbal, and you get the quant and verbal scores out of 60 overall. So when you think about achieving a certain GMAT score, you shouldn't just think about getting at 730 or 760. You should think about, hey, what abilities am I aiming for in SCCRRC, arithmetic and algebra? Because this is what you need to achieve to get to this. Okay. Now, when I said acing the GMAT is about building ability, and then I also said timing, exam strategy, and so on and so forth are secondary overall. So I'm going to really just give you another data point. Again, at e-GMAT, we are sticklers for data. And what I'm going to really show is an attempt of a student who had an incredible score improvement, but more importantly, his score improvement was driven by improvement in ability, and you can really clearly see that in the data. And he didn't worry about timing overall. And the reason why I have it is also because you can download his ESR. So there's this guy who improved, I think his name is Axel. He improved from a verbal score of 17 to a verbal score of 40. These are his abilities in the corresponding subsections. You can see his ability in CR, RC, as well as SC. Really good in SC, but pretty good in CR and RC as well. But and Payal can share the URL, and you can download his ESR. He was generous enough to share his ESR. But once you download the ESR, what you're going to really see is how he progressed during the test. These are blocks of 41 questions. And in these blocks of 41 questions, what you really see is he did really well in the first 2 blocks. He made sure that the test served him difficult questions. And then, even though, and when you download his ESR, you're going to see this data over here. Even though he was short of time in over here and over here, so blocks 3 and 4, actually more so over here and here, he was able to get a V40, which is 91st percentile on verbal. Why? Because when he made mistakes, when he had to rush through, he made mistakes on difficult questions, not on easy questions. So again, once you have ability, you do well. The test is fairly forgiving. There's a question that says 94th percentile means, did this student get 100% accuracy? No, he probably made 3 or 4 mistakes, but the questions that he made mistakes on were difficult questions. He did not make mistakes on easy questions. He proved to the test, Aviral, that he had high ability. And I know, Aviral, you're worried about SC because you aced CR and RC when you got a 700, but you didn't. SC is where you faltered. I looked at your ESR that you sent a couple of days back. So, but trust me, had you revised SC, well, you would have gotten that 94th percentile too. But yeah, this is again the old format, which is when we used to get so much more data. Once the GMAT went to the new format, they did not invest in their old tools. So again, the thing that I want to make sure you understand is acing the GMAT is about building ability, and everything else, yes, it's important, but not even half as important. And I'm going to just increase the font size so that you guys can copy and paste the URLs. Okay, so let's talk about another important thing. So if you have to build ability, you've got to first put efforts where they're due. So let's talk about study plans now. And here is my question. What does a personalized study plan do? What does a personalized study plan do? Okay, I'm going to stop broadcast results so that I get a few more unbiased responses. I want to see variety in responses. The question is, what does a study plan do? What is the goal of a study plan? Three, two, and one. Okay, I have some decent answers, some okay answers, and I have some really good answers. The answer that I like the most is guide your baseline on your strengths and weaknesses to get to your so as to get to your desired score. I like that answer. A study plan doesn't give you a purpose. A purpose is required for a study plan. That's a prerequisite to form a study plan. Allows you to strengthen your weakness. Yes, that's one of the things, but that's not just what a study plan does. So look at these responses, and I'm going to tell you what a study plan is supposed to do, and tell me, is that what you thought it was? Okay. So what does a study plan do? It answers these three questions. How will I as an individual with certain strengths, certain weaknesses, a certain amount of time that I can put in, will get to my target GMAT score. It gives you an estimate of how much time do you need to reach your target GMAT score. And more importantly, probably the most important thing is it tells you where you need to invest that time. So if you have to study 120 hours, where are those 120 hours going to be invested, and how are you going to track whether you're actually improving, whether you're moving towards that target GMAT score or not? Okay, you guys have been studying for the test. How do you track your improvement today? How do you track your improvement when you start taking your study, when you start executing on it? Okay, let's get to 15 responses. Three, two, and one. 19 responses. Mocks is the most popular response here. Mocks is one of the worst ways to track your improvement while learning. Mocks is a great tool to track your improvement when you're in the last 30% of your preparation or last 20%. But while learning, it's a really bad tool. And we're going to demonstrate why that's a bad tool. But again, you see this over here. Most of the people say mocks. Why? Because frankly, no one else provides a tool to track your improvement while you're studying. So if your answer is mocks, you're studying in an antiquated manner. And then I'm going to just prove this point over here in a few minutes. But let's take two case studies. We're going to look at case studies of two students. We're going to improve from 600 to 740. We're going to call them Abby and Chase. Okay. Both of them have a starting score of 600. Both of them want to get to a score of 740. Do you think they need the same study plan would work for them? Yes, no? Okay, no, very good. Let's see how the study plan needs to be. So let's define the starting points for both of them. Abby has a starting quant score of 42 and a starting verbal score of 31. JS has a starting quant score of 49 and a starting verbal score of 23. Okay, so observations. What do you observe about Shreyas and Abby? Just from this. What do you observe about Shreyas and Abby? What can you say? Both of them are at 600, but how are they different? Okay. Strengths of verbal and quant varies. One is good in quant, the other is good in verbal. Okay. Abby has a balanced score. Cheers. Good observations. Good observations. That's good. And that's the first piece. You know, the ABC of study plans is to get these scores. But then you shouldn't stop at this. You should also figure out what is that Q42 composed of and what is that V31 composed of. Now, for the sake of simplicity, there are lots and lots of numbers. Make sure you have a pen and paper here because these numbers are going to continue from this point on. That you write so that you can write down, keep a track of these numbers. Okay. You have 10 numbers on this. You have Abby's distribution in quant, in arithmetic algebra. You have Abby's distribution in SCCR and RC on verbal. Okay, now for the sake of simplicity, I have kept, on the verbal side things to be very similar, on the quant side things to be very similar. But as a Viral will tell you, who just took the GMAT I think 2 days back, these numbers could be very, very different. Now, a yes/no poll. Before you start preparing, how many of you get these data points? How many of you get these data points? Which is your ability scores in arithmetic algebra and SCCR and RC. Why do you not get these data points? 83% of you saying no. Why not? Why do you not get these data points? I mean, figure it out. What are your starting points? You didn't know how to get them, where to get them. Mocks don't provide this data. You're right. The only test that provides this data is the official test, which means you've got to spend $250, and then you have to spend $30 to get an ESR. Okay. Now, how else can you get this data? Is there an e-GMAT student here? How would you get this data? A, Scholaranium. Where else would you get this data from? Scholaranium, take ability quizzes will give you this data. What else? Take a Sigma X mock. Take one mock, it will give you all of those ability scores. If you take a Sigma X mock, you'd get all of these ability scores right then and there. You can take one for free, yes. And Payal will be happy to, or Sandeep can share the URL with you over here. Okay. No other practice test will give you these scores. In fact, there's a reason why no other practice test gives these scores. No other practice test has independent ability engines to give you these scores. They're not built around the same algorithm. Your older GMAT prep, that's the one that used to have 36 questions in quant and 41 questions on the verbal side, it used to have these ability scores. It would give you those ability scores. When the GMAT updated, then the test. They made it the official GMAT exams. They stopped doing that. They said, if we can charge $30 for it, why give this thing free of charge? Okay. So the next question. Do you think Abby and Chaves, they need to achieve the same quant and verbal scores to get to 740? I have the yes no poll over here. Need to put in the same amount of time on quant and verbal? And need to study the same content in quant and verbal? The answer is simply no. Okay. Now, one of the things that I want you to be honest about is, I want you to ask yourself as you're doing this, while creating your study plans, how many of you actually went through this exercise as you're going through this section? Because it will tell you the power of data and the power of precision in terms of directing your efforts in the right direction, or moving your efforts in the right direction. So how do you figure out how to build your study plan? And to make sure that our students are able to do that, we built this tool called GMAT Planner, which has AI built into it, which takes into account 10,000 GMAT attempts to find a personalized study plan for each and every one of you. Okay, so we're going to talk about Abby. Remember, Abby had a target quant score of a starting quant score of Q42 and a starting verbal score of V31. Abby's strategy when it comes to getting to the score of 740, is going to be to make sure that she first improves. That she first improves her verbal score to a V42, as you can really see over here, and then she improves her quant score to a Q48. Okay. Now, where does Abby spend her time? How close is this test series to the actual GMAT? You ask? It's actually very close. Very, very close. You can go read some of the reviews over there, which people have on GMAT Club. Okay. So where does Abby spend time? And my apologies if this is not legible, but essentially what you really see is Abby needs to spend 2.1 minutes weeks in SC to improve from her starting score of 59th percentile to her target ability, which is 94th percentile. Similarly, she needs to spend 1.1 weeks in arithmetic to go from a starting ability of 42 percentile to a target ability of 65 percentile, and so on and so forth. So what you see is a precise definition of where she needs to spend time. If she starts studying today, and if she can only spend 20 hours per week, this improvement would take her about 2 months or so. Now, if she starts to put in more time, she can really do this in about a month and a half. Okay. Now, let's talk about Chase here. Chase had a starting score of Q49, as you guys can see over here, and a V23. You can see the corresponding percentiles over here. Okay. His strategy needs to be quant driven. So, I mean, he still needs to improve his verbal a lot, but his strategy is primarily quant driven. Now, his study plan looks very different. His starting abilities are different, as you guys can really see over here. The abilities in arithmetic and algebra and SC, CR, and RC, and his target abilities correspondingly are also different over here. Because his starting and his target abilities are different, there's a lot more time spent. For example, on SC, he's spending close to 3 weeks, but 33% more time. So, Chase versus Abby. Chase and Abby different quant scores, target quant score, target verbal score. Preparing for a Q48 is very different from preparing for a Q50. Preparing for a V42 is very different than preparing for a V40, although both of them are high scores. But where they spend time and how much time they spend are even more different. For example, for Chase, he needs to spend 9 weeks on verbal and 1.5 weeks on quant. For Abby, she needs to spend about 6 weeks on verbal and about 3 weeks on quant. Okay, twice as much time as Chase needs to do on quant, and you know, about 60% of the time that Chase needs to do on verbal. Again, the overall prep for Abby is 9 weeks. The overall prep for Chase is about 10.5 weeks. Similar prep time, but their focus is very different. Now, this is just 50% of your personalized study plan. But can you really see how the study plan guides where you spend your time, even at a course level? Okay, now here comes the even kicker part. But this is not the biggest difference though. The biggest difference is, you know, when you're spending these 6 weeks over here, when Abby is spending these 6 weeks on verbal and Chase is spending these 9 weeks on verbal, where are they spending these 6 weeks? Why? Because they have very different starting points. Okay, that's the biggest difference. And to understand that, let's understand a framework of learning. How do we learn? And this is something which is not just with pertaining to GMAT, it pertains to anything. If you're learning music, you learn the same way. If you're learning tennis, you learn the same way. How many of you have learned a skill over here? A skill could be a sport, it could be music, it could be tennis, it could be table tennis, it could be badminton, it could be cricket. How many of you have learned a skill? Dancing. If you can write down the skill that you've learned, or as we call them as extracurriculars. Which skill? Badminton, okay. Dance, swimming, yes. Guitar. And just write down one. Billiards, yes. Now, any skill that you learn, if you've reached a high level of ability, this is the path that you go through. And which is, hey, you learn the basic concepts in it. If you want to learn swimming, you've got to learn the breathing. You've got to learn the strokes, and you start from you know, I think the basic stroke, which is that you actually, even in the concepts piece, you actually learn how to move your body in water. Then you learn the application, which is when you start to learn the strokes. Then you master application. Then you refine to perfection. And then you make sure that as you go from one subsection to the other, you maintain your performance. If you've mastered a skill, even if you've done coding, someone said coding, which is a nice skill, by the way, that's how you go about doing it, right? You learn the basic concepts, you do some application, you master that application, and then you refine to perfection. It's a journey, right? Isn't that, if you learn coding, for example, you understand how various statements work. How does an if statement work? How does a for statement work? How does an object work? How do various constructs do? Then you start programming along with learning some of these. You learn application to a certain degree. Then you focus on refining. If you're learning badminton, you learn various shots. Responses, guys? In the short answer poll, can you guys? Yeah. Okay. Now, how many of you study for the GMAT this way? Okay. You try. How do you try? Which source tells you how to do this? We're going to just look at this in a moment. So, we're talking about Chase and Abby right now. So let's see, where does Abby spend time? And it's really important for you to look at this data over here. So you see the stages of learning. What is Abby's starting percentile in SC? What is Abby's starting percentile in SC? 59, right? Now, does she know the concepts if she is at 59 percentile? Yes, she knows most of the concepts. Remember this chart again. Remember this chart. If you are at around 60th percentile, you cannot be at 60th percentile if you don't know most of the concepts. Okay, it's really, really important that you understand this. Let me just move this annotation here. You can't hit 50th percentile if you don't know most of the concepts and if you don't know how to apply concepts to a somewhat degree. Once you master application, even then you hit just the 70th percentile. Remember, percentile is a comparative term. You hit that 90th percentile when you refine to perfection. Okay. Now, since Abby already is starting at a 59th percentile, she knows the concepts and she knows applications to a pretty good degree. She's going to spend some time fixing areas where she needs to fix her application, but a majority of those almost 2 weeks on SC would be spent on mastering the application and refining to perfection. And the same story is going to continue for CR and RC. Does that make sense? Okay. On the quant side, however, things are very different. She's starting at a 42nd percentile. Okay, so she needs to spend time learning concepts and application and then mastering application. Now remember, she only wants to get to 60 odd percentile, so she doesn't need to spend time on refining to perfection. Okay. Now, just as a legend, the darker the color here, the more time you need to spend, the more focus you need to have. But does this make sense? Is this logical? Fairly logical, right? Now, where does Chase spend time? Chase really bad on the verbal side of things. So he has to spend a lot of time in learning concepts and application in all subsections of verbal. This is where he's going to spend about 1.5 of those 3 weeks that he has in each of these subsections, because he's starting at these 34th percentile. Okay. Now what about quant? Where do you think Chase would be spending time on quant? Purely refining to perfection. He's already at a Q49. Yes, you guys are getting it now. Refine to perfection and then maintain somewhat. Okay, that's all. Now, your study plan should guide you to do this. And even though both Chase and Abby are aim for that 740 score, their path, the time required to reach the score, and where they're gonna study from, which is the components of e-GMAT course used to achieve the score, they're very, very different. And then you can really say, hey, they started at 600, they want to get to the 740, they're going to study the same way. No, they're not going to study the same way. They're going to study very different ways. Their tracking metrics throughout their learning phases are going to be very, very different. Okay. Again, you need help with this? Write to me. So now, The next question is, how do we build ability? We know GMAT's important. We know GMAT's a test of ability. We know how to build a personalized study plan. Okay. This is all that we have learned so far. The next piece which is there is, how do you build ability? Now that we know the 4 stages of learning as well, we know the 4 stages are, you've got to learn concepts, you've got to learn application, you've got to master it, and then refine to perfection. Okay. Now, to tell you how to build ability, I want to make sure that we revise this over here, which is that as you learn concepts and you learn some application, you kind of hit that 50th percentile. As you master application, you hit that 70th percentile. And as you refine to perfection, you hit that 90th percentile. Now, yes, no poll. How many of you in any subsection are stuck at 60th percentile or lower? Most of you are, otherwise you won't be in this session, right? Some of you are stuck at 60th percentile or lower in many subsections. And I can tell you from my experience of these 40,000 odd students that I've taught that that essentially people who get stuck at 60th percentile and people who get to that 90th percentile, they're not very different. Okay, just to really tell you the number of people who get to this. 200,000 people take the GMAT. If you're at that 60th percentile, you are among those 80,000 people who get to that 60th percentile or better. People who get to this spend the same time learning these concepts. Most of them have a very similar starting ability, and their capabilities aren't very different as well. I mean, a lot of people think, hey, this guy got a 740 on the GMAT, he must have been smarter. No, he must have spent more time learning. No, that is not the difference. Okay. The thing about 90th percentile is that 90th percentile is about achieving perfection. It's not about learning the content. Okay. Someone just said early on when or wrote this in the Q&A pod that I studied sentence correction from Manhattan GMAT sentence correction book. When you were reading from that book, how many times did you get feedback? Do you know? How many times does that book give you an opportunity to seek feedback? Well, it does. It does. It's about 9 times. There are 9 to 10 chapters. Each one of them has a quiz. That's the only time you get feedback. Okay. Now, let's kind of talk about this. How do you achieve perfection? So I'm going to really look at a 60th percentile guy versus a 90th percentile guy. The person who looks at 60th percentile, he says, hey, and we're doing this in the context of SC. Says GMAT sentence correction is about learning 8 major error types, and starting with subject verbs, pronouns, modifiers, parallelism, and comparison, and then it goes to meaning as well. Okay. The person, and again, how do you solve questions? They use splits as the primary technique. They say, hey, if I can't get anything through splits, I'm going to really look at meaning. When they're learning the concepts and methods, which is, when you get to that 50th, 60th percentile, they typically get 7 to 10 feedback points, and which is when if they utilize the exercises at the end. How much time do you spend learning the concepts, and how much time do you spend practicing? If you spend those 40-50 hours of just on sentence correction, 30% time is spent learning, 70% of that time is spent practicing. Those of you who've started either using a book or using a regular course, is that something which is very typical? That's how you learn, right? You study subject verb as a whole entity. You basically get some feedback after subject verb, if at all. Then you study the next piece, then you study the next piece. You spend a lot of time practicing. The 90th percentile student doesn't look at GMAT SC as 8 concepts. He looks at GMAT SC as learning 200 major concepts which are in these blocks, because that's what the truth is. There are about 200 major concepts in there. That person, if you want to achieve that 90th percentile, you need to use meaning as the primary method. Just on a side note, I'm going to just pass this session on to Payal. But do you know when did e-GMAT start using the term meaning in GMAT sentence correction? Which year? Anyone has an idea? 2010. We were the first company. Payal actually was the inventor of the meaning-based approach. If you go back to Beat the GMAT, you're going to see an argument on Beat the GMAT where Ron Purewal from Manhattan GMAT says meaning is nothing. We really say, hey, this is an example where the official guide uses meaning, and meaning is something which is very critical. A year and a half down the line, Stacy Koprinz uses the exact same example in an article on Beat the GMAT. The number of feedback points during learning, person who gets to that 90th percentile, implicitly or explicitly, if you want to get to it in the first go, you need to get about 80 to 100 feedback points. And how that time is spent between learning and practice, you've got to really do this. If you want to learn this much, these 200 concepts, if you've got to learn them well, if you've got to make use of these 80 to 120 feedback points, this is what you need to spend learning. Do you see the difference in learning in these two students? Has anyone over here worked with a private tutor? Okay. When you work with a private tutor, isn't it the feedback that makes you improve faster? Anyone who's worked with a private tutor, isn't it the feedback that you get that makes you improve? That feedback that's personalized to you? Right? Think about it yourself. If GMAT sentence correction tests 200 concepts, how can you achieve perfection if you get feedback only 7 to 10 times during learning? The other thing is, what is that feedback that tells you that you're learning these concepts in the right manner? And the last piece is, when do you learn to apply these concepts? While you're learning these concepts or after you've learned these concepts? How many full-length questions, again, I'm talking about just the context of SC, but this applies to other subsections as well. How many full-length questions do you think you solve while learning SC from Manhattan GMAT book? And this is again applies to pretty much every other thing over there. How many full-length questions do you solve? That answer is 0. 0. You have questions which are there, they're not full-length questions. They teach you concepts, they evaluate you on concepts. And then you say, okay, go start questions, solve questions from the official guide. When you look at the e-GMAT platform, and this is just in the context of sentence correction, if you add critical reasoning, reading comprehension, quant, you're looking at about 600 feedback points. But when you learn concepts, you get 75 feedback points. Each of this is personalized to you. While learning application and concepts and application learning is interspersed, you get 23 personalized feedback points. Once you've learned the concepts and application, when you get to that mastering application and refining to perfection, you again get 30 to 50 depending on how you build those quizzes. And then to maintain those performance, you get at least 5 feedback points over there. What do you get feedback points? Okay. And verbs. Simple present, simple past. Can you do that? Simple present continuous. Do you understand that concept? Each of these is a feedback point. You have about 15 concepts in verbs. You need to know how many of those concepts can you master in the context of complex application. Mastery of each one of these is a feedback point. Similarly, when you go to subject verb, same thing. When you go to arguments and critical reasoning, you have arguments that have segments. You have arguments where you talk about simple logical gaps. You have arguments where you talk about numbers, and think of these argument types in the context of question types. That's feedback points. So, what is it that you need to do to achieve mastery of application? You've got to get that feedback point. You've got to do correction based on that feedback point. And to do that, I'm now going to invite Payal to demonstrate how that data, which we get from feedback point, powers perfection. Okay, Payal, over to you now. So guys, welcome Payal, GMAT Club's top rated instructor. And
all right, thank you, Rajat, for that wonderful introduction. I've been really glued on to this presentation. It's been really interesting to go through the entire manner in which you've explained why is GMAT score of 730 plus important. I think it's very important for us to have that end goal, that end motivation, right, such that it powers us through the hard work that we have to put in order to get to that end goal. So I really appreciate that. And then again, explaining the entire journey. What is it that the GMAT test? It's a test of your ability. And now we are down to the point wherein, yes, you have to master, you have to get to that level of high perfection, that 90th percentile in every subsection. So how do you master that application? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to build the skill of application in order to get to our target score of 90th percentile. All right, so and welcome everyone. Really very excited to be here, and let's get going. So what do you need to achieve mastery of application? Let's talk about that. So there are three things that you absolutely need. The first one is, and I'm going to read this verbatim because I'm going to repeat this throughout my presentation. You need to learn the step-by-step method that you can use consistently in order to solve every question in that subsection. And I'm going to be taking sentence correction as an example. We've been talking about sentence correction. So I want you to focus on the underlined words. Learn the step-by-step method, okay, that you utilize consistently, not just that you utilize once for a specific kind of question, right? No, this is a method that you have to use consistently for every question in sentence correction. And again, whatever I talk about in the context of sentence correction is absolutely applicable across the board for all the 5 subsections, right? So all right, now how do you do this? In order to learn the step-by-step method, you need to do 2 things. The first one is you need to have detailed solutions such that you learn from each and every question that you are attempting, okay? Okay, it's very important for us to, first of all, understand what is it that we need to do. Secondly, how is it that we can get to that point in a very effective manner, right? And for that, you need to have those detailed solutions so that you learn, you get the maximum return from every question that you attempt. Okay, that's the goal here. One question that you attempt, you need to get the maximum from it so that when you solve the very next question in sentence correction, right, you're able to apply the learnings from the previous question that you've attempted. And I'm going to go into the details of what do I mean by that. Okay, all of us review the solutions, but to what detail do we review the solution? That is something that I'm going to elaborate on. Okay, the second thing that you need to do is you need to be efficient with it, right? All of us are working professionals, right? You have a family to take care of. There are multiple things that you're involved in, and GMAT really requires a lot of effort, right? So how do you get to your end goal of 90th percentile in an efficient manner? That is where the feedback comes in. The importance of data that Rajat has spoken about. That is what I'm going to demonstrate to you. Why is that feedback important right at that point? What is it that you can do with that data point at that particular point such that the next 20 hours that you spend on sentence correction, they are the most effective 20 hours that you spend, right? So So this is the theme of the first part of my presentation, and I'm going to be coming back to this slide again and again. So so you can take a screenshot of this, or just keep these points in mind. So we are learning one single method to solve questions, to solve SC questions. We are then going to talk about how can you benefit from the detailed solutions. What kind of review do you need to do in order to get the maximum from it, and how can you get to your 90th percentile in the most efficient manner utilizing the data. Okay, and I'm going to be giving you examples of the kind of data that you will get from the e-GMAT platform, or that you need to get. Okay, so first let's talk about the method. Okay, so I'm going to take an SC question for demonstration. Now tell me, when you typically solve an SC question, what is a method that you utilize? So just to describe the method that you use to solve an SC question. If you're saying meaning-based method, I want it to be a little bit more elaborate. If you're saying splits, I want that to be a little bit more elaborate. What do you do first? What do you do next? So take, let's say, 30 seconds to type out your response. I have one response so far. Rules and elimination, process of elimination. Okay. Checking the modifiers. First meaning. Okay. Take time to understand the meaning, then go by rules. All right. What else? Splits. Okay, meaning, then error analysis, then POE. Okay, let me broadcast the results now. I've been reading out these responses. Understand the intended meaning, vertical scan, POE. Good step-by-step, very well defined step-by-step method. Understand the meaning, find a deterministic answer, then go to choices and POE. I believe you're an e-GMAT student. The language used here indicates that. Read the question, understand the meaning, and looking for error simultaneously, then look at the answer choices. Use reading strategy to get the meaning. 2 by 3, 2 by 3 split after POE, after meaning. Okay, all right. Now, I'm going to give you, so first of all, thank you for your responses. Let's solve this SC question utilizing the method that you typically use, and then we'll talk about how, and then we'll go through this in detail. And I'm going to give you about 1.5 minutes here to solve the question. Okay. Let me get the poll here. Okay, give me 1 second. I'll just create this poll real quick. All right. Everyone ready? All right, there you go. Okay, 90 seconds are up and I only have 25 responses. So I'm going to give you another 30 seconds so that I can get more responses here. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay. So how was this question? Here are the results. Choices E, C, and E are the most loved choices, and then B and D are almost at the same level. Choice A, not very many people selected. So how did you feel when you were solving the question? Did you feel confident about it? Did you feel things were very much in control? If this test appeared in your attempt, would you have felt, yes, I can answer questions? So again, I want to get some level of some idea about what your mindset was when you were solving this question. So confident, quite long though, average type question, very easy, hard. Okay, not too confident, very easy. Okay, all right, good. So I am going to, let's go through the solution. Okay, and then I'm going to tell you what the correct answer is. And probably you guys can guess that choice C was marked the maximum by maximum number of people. So choice C appears to be the correct answer, but we'll see. Okay, so let me take this away for a bit. And all right. So let's ask about this. Are there splits in this question? Yes or no? And let me get a yes no poll so that you guys can just click on that. Yeah, so are there splits in this question? Or can you solve this question based on splits? Okay, tell me where are the splits? Help me. Frankly, I don't follow that process very much. So okay, what do you mean by splits? I have a question here. What do you mean by splits? Okay, so if splits are basically when people do vertical scanning to find similarities and dissimilarities. This is a method that is utilized, that is actually explained by a number of other test prep companies. So essentially, you highlight the parts of the choices which are common, and then you decide, okay, which split is definitely wrong, and then you do that. Frankly, in this question, I tried to find splits, but I was at a loss because in order for me to look for splits, I had to essentially read each and every answer choice, and even when I did that, there wasn't really a clear idea of splits. Do you guys agree with that? Do you guys see that there are no splits that you can utilize in order to solve this question? Do you guys agree with that? Okay. Now, for those of you who've been preparing, right, for quite some time, and those of you who have an idea about what kind of questions appear on the test, does this question seem like it's very much in the realm of a typical GMAT SC question? What's your take on it? I already know the answer, but I want to see what your take on it is as a test taker. Absolutely. This is very much like a question that you can actually see on the test, right? Now, given what Rajat has explained to you regarding the ability, do you absolutely need to solve, do you have to build your ability so that you can solve questions such as these, such as this one? Given that you need to target that 730 plus, that you need to be able to solve difficult questions, you absolutely need to be able to solve a question like this, right? Okay, good. I'm glad that we are all on the same page with regards to that. Now, again, I'm repeating this. You cannot use the splits method. You cannot just scan the answer choices to solve a question which is as difficult as this one. And this is a difficult question, okay? And in order to achieve that 90th percentile ability in SC, you need to be able to consistently answer difficult questions correctly. You need to be able to do that, right? All of us agree with that. Good. All right, so now let's see how we can use. So essentially you cannot use a splits method. You have to use the meaning based method in order to solve such difficult questions correctly. That is an absolute must. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate how is it that you can solve this question using the meaning based method. Okay, so let's do that. The first and the foremost thing that I do whenever I see any sentence correction question is I read the sentence, and this is a relatively heavy sentence, right? I read the sentence by strategically pausing at appropriate points so that I understand the meaning completely. There are two things that I want you to focus on. Both are highlighted in blue. Strategically pausing, which means you need to read slowly. How many of you read slowly today when you read a sentence? I understand GMAT is a timed exam, but how many of you actually read slowly so that you can understand everything? Good, that majority of you do. Okay, I know that the balance is moving towards the no now. And for those of you who are selecting no, I want you to make that note today, that read slowly. And I'm going to explain to you why that is the case. Okay, I understand GMAT is a timed exam. I understand that you are running against the clock. But frankly, all I'm telling you to do is redistribute the time. And I'm going to explain that to you. Okay, so strategically pausing, again, I don't want you to pause after every word. I want you to strategically pause at designated pause points so that you understand the meaning completely. Not just the gist of the sentence, not just a brief idea about the sentence. You need to have a complete idea of the sentence, and I'll explain to you why that is the case, why that's required. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do now. So I start reading the sentence. The church coined the date February 14th as Valentine's Day with an ulterior motive. So let me just pause at this point. Okay, so I'm going to pause at this point and then I read further. So far what I've read is the church coined the date, used the date as Feb 14th as Valentine's Day with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia. Okay, so the church did this with a certain motive. And what was that motive? The motive was to this pagan celebration of Lupercalia. This was a pagan celebration, and their motive was to Christianize this pagan celebration. Okay, all right. Then I read further. Is claimed by a few experts. Okay. Now, how many of you, when you were reading this sentence, got a little bit jittery when you came to this point? I mean, you read till this point fine, but then when you came to this point, is claimed by a few experts, how many of you felt, what's going on here? Something is off about this. Good. That is one of the very good indications that your strategic pausing method is working, because as you are reading slowly, you can identify the issues in the sentence rather quickly. Okay, when you're reading slowly and you see this, okay, is claimed by a few experts. There's something not quite right with it. I don't yet know what, but let me read further and let me first understand what is claimed by a few experts. Now, what is claimed by a few experts? Tell me here. What's claimed by a few experts is the fact that the church called Feb 14th as Valentine's Day with that motive to Christianize the pagan celebration. This entire aspect over here is claimed by these few experts. Okay, that's what the sentence says so far. All right. Okay, then let's read further. But it is celebrated on this date. Now, but what does that indicate? That indicates a contrast here, right? But it is celebrated on this date. Now, what is celebrated on this date? What does it modify here? What does it refer to here? Tell me. What is celebrated on this date? Valentine's Day is celebrated on this date. And what is this date? This is Feb 14th. Absolutely. But Valentine's Day is celebrated on this date to honor the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial is the more prevalent belief. Now, this part, because there is presence of but, it tells me there is a contrast. Now, what is the contrast about? What is this contrast about? As you read this part, what do you think the contrast is about? Beliefs about what? What a few experts believe versus the majority. Yes. To show a different part of the story, reason of celebration. Okay. All right. Absolutely. So essentially, the first thing that the author is telling us is there are two claims about celebration of Feb 14th as Valentine's Day. What is the reason behind celebrating Feb 14th as Valentine's Day? There are two claims about it, and by the way, these are contrasting claims. What is claim one? Claim one is expressed through this part over here. Claim one is that church designated Feb 14th as Valentine's Day with this ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration, right? Second claim is that it is celebrated to honor anniversary of Valentine's death or burial, right? Now, there is a third thing. Who maintains belief claim one? Who's making claim one? Okay, a few experts are making claim one, absolutely. Who's making claim two? Who's making claim two? Majority of people, the more prevalent belief, absolutely. So this is point number 3. Claim 1 is made by a few experts, claim 2 is made by, is the more prevalent belief, right, absolutely. Now, is claim 2 in any way linked to claim 1? Do the people who believe, who actually have who have made this claim 1, do they also believe in claim 2? No, absolutely not. All right, good. Okay, so after you read the sentence, let's come back to the output of the meaning analysis. After you read the sentence, you should have gotten each of these 3 points. You should have understood each of these 3 points. Okay, now I'm going to ask you a question. And let me get a poll here, please. Give me 1 second here. Okay, how many did you get? Did you understand the first time when you answered the question? Okay, so 1, 2, 3, I'll say 0 as well. Hopefully there shouldn't be anyone who selects 0. Okay, tell me, how many were you able to understand? How many of these points were you able to understand? So I see 90% of you were able to get all the 3 points. Good. All right. And 9 of you. And okay, so 75-25 split. All right, very good. So I'm glad that you were able to get each of these points. Very good. Okay. So let's now move forward. Essentially, when you are so what I'm doing is I'm not just solving the question, I'm also telling you what all things you have to be careful about when you are solving the question on your own. What all things do you have to keep in mind so that you learn from each and every step of the solution. So if you were able to understand all the 3, that means you can understand the meaning of the sentence well enough. So it's a good job. If you were able to understand 1 or 2, and I'm glad that there's nobody who falls in this segment, that is good. So for people who were not able to get all the 3, you need to first focus on building your skill set. That is very, very important in understanding the meaning of the sentence by strategically pausing. Because for you to be able to solve this questions such as this one correctly, you need to first understand all the aspects of the meaning. And you e-GMAT students can learn this technique using the Master Comprehension course that is part of their package. That is in the package that they purchase. Okay. So strategic pausing, very, very important. So the 10 of you who were not able to get all the 3 points, that's my feedback to you. Please take that seriously. Okay. Now let's come back to solving this question. Now, once we understand the meaning of the sentence, we then analyze the errors. Now, definitely this sentence has an error. Tell me, what is the error in this sentence? Hardly anyone selected choice A as the correct answer. So there's definitely some error in this choice. Tell me, what is the error? Is claimed, what is wrong with that? Subject verb, explain to me, what is wrong with it? Is claimed has no subject, absolutely. So if you think about it, this sentence, the church coined the date, blah, 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 is already a complete clause, right? It has a subject and a verb. Is claimed kind of looks hanging. It seems as if there is no subject for this verb is claimed. The same is the case with this one as well, but it is celebrated on this date. Again, this is it's a complete sentence till this point. Now again, you have a verb which appears to be hanging. Now, one thing that I do want to commend all of you about is that despite there being a grammatical error in this sentence, which is really a sentence structure related error, majority of you were able to get the meaning of the sentence. And that's a very, very important skill. Even when the sentence does not communicate, is not written in the correct form, you need to infer the meaning of the sentence, and that's what you guys did here intuitively, and that's a very, very important thing. So good job at that. Okay. All right. So let's carry forward. So we know that there is a sentence structure related error. We understand all the aspects of meaning of the sentence. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this meaning analysis with us, this error analysis with us that we performed on the original sentence, and review each answer choice one by one on both grammatical and logical grounds. So now this is the information. The information regarding error analysis is here. The information regarding all the 3 points of meaning analysis is over here. We take this analysis with us and look at each answer choice one by one. Choice B. Okay. So for not many of you selected choice B, and let me get the poll here as well. Select the correct answer to the question, yeah. So there were quite a few of you, so only 8 people selected choice B. So I am going to ask these 8 people a separate question, but first let me ask the others who rejected choice B, why did you reject it? Meaning is lost. How is it lost? This choice, what it's saying is that a few experts, as if the few experts had this ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration. Absolutely. So it wasn't the motive of the few experts, it was the motive of the church, right? So that's why this sentence is wrong. So essentially, choice B is wrong because it does not express claim 1 properly, right? That's the main reason why this choice is wrong. Okay? Now, there is nothing wrong with the use of word while. While is absolutely correct. You can use while to express a contrast. That's absolutely correct. Okay, but it's really this structure with an ulterior motive modifies a few experts, the action that few experts claimed. That is what is wrong. So it doesn't communicate the correct meaning, and that's why it's very important. And now, if you notice, now let me ask this question. People who selected choice B as the correct answer, why did you not notice this shift in meaning? Tell me that. Only the people who rejected choice B who accepted choice B as the correct answer. Why did you not notice this shift in meaning? And it's very important. And again, guys, yes, there are only eight of you who selected choice B, but we can definitely learn from the thought process that these 8 students went through, so that we don't make that same mistake when we solve questions on our own. Maybe some other difficult question stumps us the way this question stumped them, right? So it's very important to learn from one another. Okay, so not able to understand meaning. So now you understand why understanding the meaning is so very important, right? So if you were not able to do the previous step correctly, you will have a problem going forward. right? All right. So now let's go further to choice C. Choice C is a very interesting choice. Okay. 39% of the class selected choice C. Now tell me, does choice C, I'm going to ask this question to everyone who selected choice C. Does choice C communicate all the aspects of the meaning as we determined? 23 of you who selected choice C. Does choice C communicate all the aspects of the meaning? And I have kind of highlighted that aspect over here. I'm going to give you a hint. Look at this word there. According to choice C, whose belief is being talked about as part of claim 2? Absolutely. So choice C does not express this third aspect of the meaning. So now let me ask this question. For those of you who selected choice C, how many of you got all the 3 points from the meaning correctly when you understood the meaning? So 23 of you who selected choice C, I want all of you, at least majority of you, to put in your answers here, whether you got all the 3 points of the meaning correctly when you read the sentence. Okay. Now, for those who got all the 3 points of the meaning correctly and are selected choice C, my feedback to you is that you are not taking the meaning with you, or you are not getting the meaning to that 200% clarity that you need to get at. Okay, yes, at a surface you are able to understand it, but you're not really that confident with it. That's why an answer choice that seems to be correct. Okay, this answer choice is a very attractive choice, no doubt about that. The sentence structure is perfect. Again, you don't see very many things wrong with it. So it is a very likely answer choice to be selected only if you don't have that crystal clear understanding of meaning. Okay, so that crystal clear understanding of meaning is absolutely required. Okay. Is this point correct? Any comments from your side, people who selected choice C? Because that's the precision that you need to get at if you do plan to score that 90 percentile in SC. You cannot just have 80% understanding. You cannot just have a fleeting understanding of the meaning and get to that 90 percentile. That is not possible at all. Because when that happens, you are going to fall in such traps where a little word changes the entire meaning. Okay? I need comments from you guys. What do you guys think about this? Because this is the point that I want to make sure that everyone understands, that the level of precision that is required. Do you guys see that? And again, it's very important. I'm going to elaborate on this a whole lot, but it's very important for you to be critical of yourself. Because till the time you're not critical of yourself, you will not be able to get to that 90th percentile. Don't consider this question or this choice to be, oh, it's just another question, or it's just one of the many questions that I got wrong. No. Consider each question to be a learning opportunity. Each question to be that stepping stone that takes you to your 90th percentile ability. Because if you don't give that level of importance to every question that you solve, the journey to your 90th percentile is going to be very, very arduous. And you may not even get to your goal. Okay. All right. So now, so this is why choice C was wrong, right? And if you, again, just if you were not able, people who selected choice C were not able to spot this distortion. Okay, and this was because you did not, despite you saying that, despite 95% of the class saying that they got all the 3 points, my guess is that not everyone got all the 3 points. Absolutely, probably that number is about only 40% of the class got all the 3 points correctly. Okay, all right, choice D. About how many people selected this choice? About 7 of you selected this choice. Again, this choice is wrong because it's, first of all, it's not clear what the more prevalent belief modifies. Secondly, again, it's not clear what is modified by as claimed by a few experts, right? So there's that issue here. Now, choice E is the correct answer. So I want to understand, why did people reject choice E? I want to understand that. Tell me, why did you reject choice E? You rejected choice E because it started with that, right? Okay. Also, it had is claimed by clause. Okay, so hold on with that. Okay, so choice C is the correct answer. Essentially, what it's saying is that the church coined. It's basically saying that the church coined Feb 14th as Valentine's Day is claimed by a few experts. Yes, there is passive voice. There's nothing wrong with passive voice, right? But the more prevalent belief is it is celebrated on this date to honor the anniversary, right? All right, so I'm going to give you a few insights as to why you rejected this choice and what is it that you need to do in order to not reject this choice. Okay, frankly speaking, the main reason you rejected this choice was because the sentence structure didn't make much sense to you. This was a little bit of an alien sentence structure. Is that correct? That is one of the reasons, right? That the sentence structure didn't seem very, very familiar to you, a sentence starting with that and all that, right? Okay, the second part is, you see the word that here, you don't see it. But the more prevalent belief is that it is celebrated on this date. You feel as if there should have been that, but there is no that here. And that is also okay. Okay. Third part is that you felt that this is passive voice and passive voice is not appreciated. It is celebrated. Again, it's passive voice. Now, each of these 3 points are your misconceptions about what is considered correct on the GMAT. Okay. So what you are going by is lack of appropriate knowledge about what is acceptable. You are giving that a whole lot more importance than the fact that choice C did not communicate the right meaning. Is that what's happening? Yes or no? Is that what's going on here? You rejected this choice and then you went ahead and selected choice C, which seemed to be attractive, even though you may, because you didn't have that strong conviction in the meaning that the sentence should communicate, you felt, okay, this choice appears to have, it appears to express the meaning as much as I have understood, so this choice should be correct. And that is the worst thing that you can do and get in the way of getting to that 90th percentile ability. So something has to change. Okay, so if you want to score 90th percentile, you need to be able to solve such questions consistently, and for that you need to master this method. Okay, so I have a question, shouldn't there be that in second clause? It's not required. And that's another misconception. Whenever that is used as a connector, you can very well omit it. Okay. Now, where do you learn all these things? Okay, where do you learn all of these aspects? You need to learn these aspects utilizing the course that gives you the opportunity to learn these. Okay, and that's where the detailed solutions, that's what I'm going to talk about. How can you effectively master all of this? Okay, what's the role of detailed solutions? Why am I so hung up on you utilizing, you needing those detailed solutions? Okay, I'm going to explain the benefit of that. I'm going to explain the utility of the power of detailed solutions. After you solve, remember what I said, one question, each question that you solve needs to be that stepping stone. Okay, that is that stepping stone to your journey to 90th percentile. Okay, that is very, that's a must. I want you to understand that. Okay, give importance to each and every question, because till the time you consider questions to be, oh, I need to practice, you will not really get to that level of precision. Okay, does this make sense? Yes or no? Does this make sense? Giving importance to each and every question that you solve. Good. All right. Now, so that's why the goal is that you learn from this question. As you solve the next question, you apply those learnings to it. As you solve the next question, you apply the learnings from the previous two questions, and so on and so forth. Now, how do you, so which means that applying learnings is a very critical part, right? How do you do that? Okay, you do that if you do strategic review of each and every question. And I'm going to demonstrate to you how is it that you do. What do I mean by strategic review? Strategic review, and I want you to listen to this part here very carefully, and I want you to tell me how many of you do this level of strategic review whenever you solve questions on your own. The first and the foremost question that you have to ask is, did you understand all the aspects of the meaning presented by the original choice, regardless of whether the original choice is written correctly or not? Did you infer, even if the choice is written, original choice is written in a weird manner, you still have to infer everything that the author has intended to communicate. So did you understand all the aspects of meaning? Okay. Second thing, so the way we did for this question, that there were three different aspects. Did you understand all the three aspects to that 200% clarity? I want you guys to ask yourself that question every time you solve every question. Second, why did you reject the correct choice? Okay, what is it that you found odd in the correct choice? Or what is it that you did not notice in the correct choice that you ended up rejecting it, right? That's very important. More likely than not, you would reject the correct choice because of some misunderstood grammatical rule. You would think, oh, passive voice is not preferred on the GMAT. Oh, I have to have that whenever it's used as a connector. Oh, a correct sentence cannot start with a preposition, cannot start with because, or cannot start with that. Those are all misconceptions. And again, I've just stated a few misconceptions, right? And that happens, you get to those misconceptions only if you are not 200% clear about the meaning that needs to be represented by the correct choice. So if you do this well, then you will not fall in these traps. Then even if you don't have that 100% clarity of what is acceptable, what is not, you would still give importance to the meaning because you would have had that level of conviction in the meaning that you wanted to express. Does this make sense? Does this make sense? Okay, good. The third thing that you need to answer is, why did you select the incorrect answer choice? Okay. Was it because of any meaning issue that you could not spot? And frankly, people selected choice C. 40% of the class selected choice C, right? It was because of the meaning distortion that they could not spot. Okay. You need to identify that. Okay. Or was it because of some misunderstood grammatical rule? That is also a case, right? You may have thought that, okay, this thing is, yeah. Or was it because you could not apply a grammatical rule correctly? You noticed that there is a grammatical error, but you could not notice a grammatical error. Let's say due to was used to present cause behind a verb, right? That's not the correct grammatical usage, right? But you didn't know that, and that's why you ended up selecting this choice. So again, you have to know precisely why did you select the incorrect answer choice, because all of these parts, there are three main things that are coming out of this. If you are not If you are not able to understand all the aspects of meaning, that means the corrective action for that is that you need to learn strategic pausing method. Okay, the corrective action for this part is that you are either not 100% confident with the meaning, that's why you are giving us giving other aspects more importance, or there is that misconception in your mind which is weighing a more which is getting a whole lot more importance in your mind. Either way, you need to correct that. Or if you the output from this will lead to the corrective action, appropriate corrective action. If it's meaning based thing, you have to take meaning with you. You have to question yourself when you are so for example, if for choice C, how can you, what learning will you take forward? You will, whenever you read the sentence, you will write down each and every aspect of meaning. And when you are still, before you are selecting before you're marking the correct choice, you will make sure, does choice C, let's say you did hone into choice C. Choice C expresses this, choice C expresses this, but it does not express this, right? You will explicitly make a note of all these things. Okay. Does this help? Your error log needs to include these three aspects, not just what is the grammatical concept that you didn't get. It needs to include each of these three aspects, and this is something that we teach our students in the session, in the course.
Payal, I just want to add one other thing to this.
Sure.
So guys, in terms of just my personal experience with this, so contrary to Payal, I'm not a grammarian. Payal understands grammar inside out. Payal understands meaning inside out. But I'm someone who solves questions using logic. So I may not be as well versed with all the intricacies of GMAT grammar or grammar in general, but I understand the intended meaning better than most people in this world. And I can tell you, if I were to take the GMAT today, I could easily get to 95th percentile on GMAT SC just by focusing on that intended meaning and with my knowledge of grammar rules that I have. I mean, that's how powerful meaning is. Now, the beauty of this is I can actually improve even further if I solve about 40 questions, as long as I review my mistakes in this manner. Why? Because when you review those mistakes, the cause of that mistake is unearthed. When you unearth that cause, you don't make that mistake again. When you don't make that mistake again, you improve. And that's how you hit that 90th, 95th, or even 98th percentile on GMAT SC. So Payal, over to you.
All right. Rajat. Oh. All right. So now I'm going to do, sorry about that. Now we're going to do strategic review of your attempt of this SC question. And again, I've been kind of doing that as I was walking you through these questions. So why did you reject the correct answer? That is the first thing. And remember, I said there were 3 points. Over here on the slide, you see 2 points. Unfamiliar sentence structure, that subject verb, and then followed by the verb, that is an unfamiliar sentence structure, and then misconception that always has to be used. And then another thing which some of you pointed out, use of passive voice. So that's the third thing. So you have to highlight these things, which ones were applicable for you. Okay, so do that. Why did you select the incorrect choice as the correct answer? For every question, for every choice, after you review the solution, you figure out, okay, what is it that you did not spot? For the first one, if you selected choice A as the correct answer, you failed to observe the sentence structure issue. If you selected choice B as the correct answer, you failed to observe meaning distortion. If you selected choice C, again, you failed to observe the meaning distortion, right? And here, this was meaning distortion number 3 here, okay? If you selected choice D, again, meaning distortion, right? You failed to observe meaning distortion, right? Now, how do you do this analysis? Right now, I'm here telling you this is what you're doing. I'm explaining this question to you just like a private tutor would, but when you are solving this question on your own, how will you do that? That is where the importance of detailed solutions is. Now, first, I want to hear something from you. I want to hear some comments from your side. Do you see value of doing this level of strategic review? Let me go back here. Do you see value of doing strategic review? Yes or no? Do you do that today? Do you do this level of review today? No. Why do you not do this level of review? Is it that you were not aware of it? Or is it that you don't have the tools to do it? Tell me, what's the answer? You're not aware of doing something like this? Or is it that you don't have the tools to do something like it? It's time consuming. Yes, it is time. Now, again, not aware of it, good. Tools, okay. Time consuming. Again, guys, I have to emphasize on this part, the time consuming part of it. What would you rather do? Solve, let's say, 700, 800 questions? In the process, get in a fast way, right? And in the process, get to that plateau and get to that frustration that I'm not improving? Or solve 100 questions, actually not, 100 questions, but do proper review, treating each question as a stepping stone towards that 90% ability. What would you rather do? If you would rather do the stepping stone approach, click on yes. If you would rather do solving 800 questions, then click on no. Remember what I said earlier when I talked about how do you learn methods. What I said was you need to have that effective and efficient way. That's what we are talking about. Right now I'm talking about the effective way, which also leads to efficiency. Okay. All right. So now let's handle the problem of not being aware of it. Now that you are aware of it, I would urge all of you to do it. Okay. Now let's handle the problem of not having the tools. That is where the detailed solutions come into picture. And let me get to the slide here. You need to have detailed solutions. Now, where can you get these detailed solutions? Detailed solutions that are based on the meaning-based process. And again, there are a lot of people, so Rajat said that this meaning-based process was invented by us here. He was kind enough to give all the credit to me. Right, but you have to be clear about what is this meaning-based process. Today, a number of test prep companies talk about meaning-based process, but they don't really they don't really talk about it in the same spirit that it needs to be talked about. Okay. What they say is, okay, look for meaning distortions, but only after you go through the grammatical stuff, right? They don't focus on strategic pausing. What level of understanding of meaning do you need to have? They don't focus on that. And that's where the quote unquote meaning-based stuff that is being talked about in the industry today leads people to not get to that 90 percentile score. Okay. And that's what I want to make sure that you understand. What is this meaning-based process? Okay. Now, you can utilize the solutions that you see in e-GMAT, whether it's the course, whether it's the Scholaranium, whether it's the mock. Each of the solutions is based on this meaning-based process. Each solution facilitates you to do the detailed strategic review that you are required to do, that you need to do in order to get to that 90 percentile. Okay. Now what I'm going to demonstrate next is the solution for this question as it exists today on the e-GMAT platform. Okay, so I'm going to show that this is a question that is in our Scholaranium platform. First and foremost, you see the same, so this is a screenshot of the solution. You see the sentence broken down by applying the strategic pausing method. You see the meaning analysis. Where do you see this kind of solution anywhere else in the industry? Do you see these solutions on GMAT Club? Do you see this level of solution in your official guide? Do you see this level of solution in Manhattan forums or Manhattan courses or any course that you see? Just 2 people have responded so far. You can say yes as well if you have seen these kind of solutions. Okay. This is e-GMAT is the only platform that gives you such solutions for each and every question that you solve on the platform. Okay. Now, next, error analysis. Detailed error analysis. Not just there is a subject verb error, there is a sentence structure error. No. Detailed error analysis over here. Okay. For each answer choice, again, I know you can't read this right now. For each answer choice, detailed explanation, expression error leading to meaning error, modifier errors leading to meaning errors. Okay, detailed stuff over here. In the correct answer choice as well, it is correct answer choice, and then we have explained to you one of the misconceptions that can be omitted when it's used as a connector. Okay, so again, you get those clarifications. And if you have any doubts, we have explicit forum, independent forum for each and every question, which is supported by our experts, the experts who have created these questions, right? Not just anybody in the not just anybody who has just the SC knowledge. These are the experts who have created these questions. Okay. So each and every question in the course, which is about what, 200, 250 questions, each and every question in the Scholarinium platform, which is about 500, 600 questions, and Rajat, feel free to correct my numbers if I'm quoting incorrect numbers, and each and every question in the mock test has these detailed solutions.
The real numbers are twice as that.
Twice as many, yes. I always mess up with the numbers.
On the verbal side, it's upwards of 1,000 questions. On the quant side, it's upwards of 1,200 questions, and yes, each question has solutions that are as detailed, if not more than this. By the way,
I was talking about just SC, Rajat, huh?
Okay, yeah. So on the SC side, you have about 410, 420 questions.
Yes. Okay. Yes, I was about that number. Yeah. All right. Okay. So again, questions for strategic review. I want you guys to take a screenshot of this. We will be sharing this PDF with you, but I want you to start doing this kind of analysis and look for solutions. Okay, by the way, I forgot to tell you, for most of the official questions also include these solutions, right? So again, very, very important. And yes, thank you, Rajat, for making that statement. Please put your questions in the Q&A part so that Rajat and or Sandeep can respond to those questions. Okay, the stuff that's pertinent to what I'm talking about, those questions you can put in the poll window over here. All right, so let's come to how can you efficiently master this method. Okay, now that's where feedback comes into picture. Now, you may ask, okay, what is this feedback first of all? Why do I need the feedback? I have to solve questions. I have to review solutions. What can feedback do? And even if I get the feedback, how can I react? How should I react to this feedback? Do you guys have these questions in your mind right now? And it's absolutely fair for you to have these questions because frankly, no one provides you with such feedback. So you don't even know the value of the feedback because you don't have that. How do you know value of something that doesn't exist in your mind, right? So that's what we are going to talk about here. All right. Let's first understand when is it that you should be learning these methods. So let me ask you this question. When do you think you should be learning the method of solving SC questions? When is the right time, according to you, that when you should be learning how to apply the methods? And I'll give you an example. If you look at Manhattan SC book, right, the GMAT book, it teaches you all the concepts. There's hardly any, there's not even a single full-length question in the exercises that you solve in that book. So you complete that entire book without solving even a single application question. So tell me, according to you, when is it that you should start learning the methods? At the beginning. Okay, I just have one response at the beginning. Okay, all right, from the start. Okay, let's walk through what typically happens in the industry today. Let's first talk about the SC. SC, you have increasing difficulty level of concepts, right? Now, you would all agree that subject-verb concepts are the most simple concepts that exist, right? Then you have verb-related concepts, and as you notice, you have more verb-related concepts than you have subject-verb related concepts, right? Verbs, there are a lot more tenses to learn and all that stuff, right? Okay, now you do pronouns. Pronouns, again, not as many concepts as there are in verbs. Modifiers, a pretty big concept chunk, right? Then parallelism, comparison, if you add parallelism and comparison, yes, you will have a lot more concepts there. Now, most test prep companies teach you application after teaching all these concepts. Okay, and I see, so I see a student saying, I heard Magush also has similar video lessons. Hold on to that thought. Rajat, if you can get the screenshot of Magush's course and where application lies there, I would really appreciate that so that I can address this concern right here itself. Most prep courses teach you application after teaching all the concepts. Okay. Now, where do you need to learn the concept? The right answer, which a number of you have said, is you need to learn the concepts, learn the method right when you're learning the concepts. That's what we do. We at e-GMAT, and I'm reading this verbatim, insert method teaching duo. What is that method teaching duo? The application and practice files at various points as you are learning the concepts, so that you learn the method as you are learning the next set of concepts, right? So what does that mean? Subject verb block. As you learn a set of concepts, we teach you the application. Verbs. Next, when you start learning verbs, we don't just insert one application file, we insert 2 application files here. Why? Because there are more concepts, so we don't want you to have that overload of concepts. We want you to learn the concepts, learn the application, then learn the next set of concepts, and then learn the application, right? Likewise, pronouns, because the number of concepts are fewer, so we just have one application. Modifiers, more number of concepts here, so more application files here, right? So we want to make sure that you're learning at every level here, okay? Parallelism, again, comparison, right? What ends up happening as you're learning this, this manner of learning concepts and learning methods, right when you are learning the concepts, what this ends up doing is, as you go through these files, what ends up happening is, okay, and somehow my thing, your ability in SC improves as you are learning the methods here. Okay, it's not that you learn all the concepts and then all of a sudden you have that jump over here. No, what ends up happening is that as you are learning the application, your ability is improving consistently. And by the time you finish all the application files in the course, all the concepts, you are already at 70th percentile level. Versus a person who's getting all the overload of the concepts, and that too without feedback, versus that person at this point is going to start at 30th or let's say 40th percentile. And then for this person, because he has such an overload of concepts, the journey to that 90th percentile becomes very, very, very difficult. It's like you are having to without building your strength, you have to now do push-ups, let's say 20 push-ups in a row, but you haven't really built your strength. You will not be able to do that. Versus over here, in the e-GMAT way, you are taking everything slowly. You are slowly building your strength to get to that level. Does this point make sense?
I think one of the things you have to understand is building ability is the same as building skill. And when you build a skill, you just don't learn all the concepts and you just go and start playing a match. No, you've got to build application while you're learning concepts. And you know, subject, verb, pronouns, modifiers, you've got to build application along with it. And then you've got to have that feedback to perfect it. That's how you build skill. Without feedback, there is no perfection. Without perfection, there is no 90th percentile. And that's something which I think you need to understand. There's a reason why only 6,000 people in the world score 90th percentile in S3, despite many of them, pretty much 80,000 odd people putting in the same amount of effort and having the same starting point. It's because feedback. It's because perfection requires that feedback, requires learning application while you're learning these concepts. Palo.
Okay. All right, so I have a question here. How does e-GMAT give feedback? I'm going to tell you right now. So I'm going to give you an example of that. So does everyone get an idea about why is it that you need to learn application while you're learning the concepts? Does everyone understand that? Does everyone understand that your journey to your 90th percentile is going to be a lot simpler if you were to learn application along with the concepts? Okay, good. Now, let me tell you the kind of feedback that you're going to get. Okay, that's very important because you have to know what kind of feedback you're getting so that you can incorporate that feedback. Okay, all right. Now, as you learn the method using the application files and the practice file, you need to know how well you're doing. Are you learning the steps properly? Are you struggling with some aspects of the method? How do you get to know about that? That is where the feedback comes into picture. You get this feedback, you apply the corrective actions right at that moment, okay? And that's how you remain on the most efficient path to mastering the method, okay? So let's take an example of a student here, and just so you all understand, while doing it, an e-GMAT student, while learning the method, gets feedback at least 23 times. At least 23 times, okay? And that's just for SC. If I were to give you the similar number for CR, that's 39 times, okay? All right, so let me walk you through a student. We're going to take a look at the dashboard of this successful student, Sahil. He scored 730 V38, okay, and you can see his review, his debrief on GMAT Club, and I'm going to share, so I will share the link with you. But when I share the PDF with you, you will have the link over here. Now, observe this thing over here. This is a subject verb. This is our subject verb module, okay. I want you to take a note of these concepts here. So you are learning 2.1 to 2.4 are the concepts that you're learning. Okay, these are just the concepts. A green number must make sense. Words that are always singular, words that change the number of the subject. Just the concepts here. Okay, in these concepts also you get feedback. This student did really well in this one. Makes sense he had certain issues, right? Now, this is the concept level feedback. This is what Rajat was talking about when he was explaining feedback to you. Okay. Now, the student then went through the concept practice. He is now testing his overall skill level in just these concepts, and this is just at the concept level. He is not as yet solving full length questions. Right now, before he moves on to the application file here, which is where he starts to solve full length questions, he tests his conceptual knowledge just on these concepts, okay? Because if his conceptual knowledge is not proper, then there's no point in him solving full length questions, right? So now in this case, Sahil demonstrated that he has good conceptual knowledge, right? Now he came to the application file and he solved the questions here, okay? Now notice, there are 5 questions here. He made certain mistakes here, right? But then look at the amount of time that he spent, about 45 minutes, or I would say 50 minutes on just 5 questions. He spent 10 minutes on an average, 10 minutes per question, but I'm guessing he would have spent at least 20 minutes on the 2 questions that he got wrong. Okay, that is the power of feedback. Sahil got the feedback that he's not doing something right here, and he implemented that feedback so that he learns right there and then. He reviewed those 2 questions in detail so that he doesn't make the same mistakes on the next set of questions that he solves. And look at the result when he came to SV practice quiz, which by the way has similar questions that are very similar to the questions that he saw in the application file, right? So when he came to the practice file, he scored 100%. That is the power of feedback. Now imagine if Sahil were just solving these 10 questions, 1 question at a time, without really spending the time to do strategic review, he would not have improved to that 100% accuracy at this point. He would not have. There is no way he would have. But because he got this feedback here and he spent the amount of time to do that proper strategic review, he was able to apply those learnings. He knew where he was faltering. He was able to apply those learnings on the next set of 5 questions that 5 to 7 questions that he attempted. Does this make sense? Yes or no? Okay.
Payal, I just want to ask a couple of other questions at this point. So, first of all, when you study using a book or any other course, have you, I mean, this is just in the context of subject verb, you see about 60 questions that are items used to evaluate you, in addition to the video lessons that impart the knowledge. Does that happen to you when you read from a book? Yeah, simple. I think let's just move away from the yes no poll. Let's go to the short answer pod. When you learn from a book, does that happen to you? No, it doesn't, right? But do you understand when you get this feedback, how can you get to that level of perfection? Now, what you really see is just one score over here, which is that 100% on this concept file. But to compute that within this file itself, we record about 50 items. Every slide that you go through, every click that you make is recorded. It's there in our database. It's assessed, analyzed, and then we give you feedback. And why is it that we are the only company in the world that does this? Because we have a dedicated technology team of 8 people that works 100% on building such technologies. This entire video engine was built from grounds up to enable that. Okay. This learning architecture is that combination of technology as well as a learning pedagogy that leads to this feedback. Even when you work with a private tutor, you won't get such granular feedback. Payal?
Rajat, can you talk about Magoosh thing as well? I think while you're at the topic. Yeah.
Yes, I think here's the Magoosh screenshot. Let's see if I can make this big enough. So this is a portion of the Magoosh course, and you really see where you have A and A over here. I'd like to really have you guys take a stab at it. What do you observe? Do you see feedback anywhere? Do you see feedback in this entire screenshot? There is no feedback. Do you see application being taught? No, there is no concept of application or practice file. Okay, the third piece, this time that you see over here is not the time that you spent on this file, it's the length of the video. I mean, creating this and the other things, you see these things, 4 minutes. The learning chunks are much smaller. You can see the number of items, says, man, these are a lot of items. But when you look deeper to really say, hey, what's the length of those items? What kind of learning is imparted? You're going to find in 3 minutes, all your learning is adjectives and adverbial phrases. There's no feedback. There's no evaluation. How do you figure out whether you've learned this properly? How do you figure out whether you've learned how to apply this? You see this one quiz over here at the end of so many items. When you take this quiz, you don't even get a score over here in the dashboard. Again, the intention is not to give you feedback, not to teach you application, but just to teach you concepts. And that's how most of the other video courses are. They're essentially a book in video form. They're not built around a private tutoring architecture. They're built around the book-based architecture. And when you learn something in a book-based architecture, you get results that a book-based architecture provides. Very few people get to that 90th percentile. Why? Because you don't get feedback. You don't get feedback, you don't achieve perfection. So hopefully that answers that Magoosh question. Again, I've not even gone into the content of this. If you watch a video lesson by us, if you watch a video lesson by Magoosh, there's another whole comparison that you're going to really see. But that's kind of besides the point.
Yeah, I was going to say that. We are not even talking about the effectiveness of each and every concept file. So we leave that to you guys to understand, to figure out. All right, so now let's come back. So this student, so let's come back to what Sahil did. He got the feedback. He spent 46 minutes, almost 47 minutes on this SV application files because he got the feedback that he's not doing well. So he spent that level of time to understand where is he faltering, and because he spent that time, he was able to score well in the next file. Now let's take another example. So I'm going to use verbs as an example here. Now look at Okay, let's look at the application file here. And the application file. Sorry about that. Again, he solved one question incorrectly, but look at the amount of time that he's spending. There are 5 questions in this file, right? But he's spending 50 minutes to solve those 5 questions, to understand how is it that he should have learned the process. So he's not just solving questions here. He is understanding the method. He's questioning himself. Why wasn't he able to understand the meaning, the manner in which e-GMAT wanted him to understand the meaning? Why wasn't he able to spot that meaning distortion? Why wasn't he able to sequence the verbs in the right manner? He's questioning that. He's questioning himself. He's being very critical. And as a result, when you see over here, he is basically doing well in the official guide quizzes. And again, this is what I was talking about. Most of the official guide questions also have the same level of detailed solutions. Okay. Now, if you notice here, verbs practice quiz, this is where you would see, okay, some of you might question me. Okay, Pai, you're saying that he spent so much time. Why did he not score well in this practice quiz? You're absolutely right. But look at what he did with the practice quiz. He did mess up. He did mess up on 2 questions, but he bookmarked those 2 questions. He spent more. Now look at the amount of detailed information that you get on these 2 questions. Which he got wrong. He actually spent a lot more time on these 2 questions on average, right? A lot more time than he spent on any of the other questions, right? But he still got them wrong. And he reviewed the solutions for these. The 9 minutes that you saw on the previous slide didn't capture the amount of time that he went into the review of that he spent reviewing the solution. Over here, he bookmarked these questions for later revision, right? So he knew that there was something not quite right with his approach when he solved these 2 questions, and he took that feedback from the system. Now, he wouldn't have recognized that if all the system would have said is, oh, you got this wrong, right? But he recognized that because the system is giving him all the tools to, first of all, the system is giving him the right kind of data, difficulty level, whether he's getting it wrong, how much time is he spending, and the system is giving him the tools to do the strategic review so that he can basically improve when he solves the next set of questions. And this is the reason why when Sahil finished the course, his percentile was already at 70th percentile. Now, next what he had to do was he had to simply cement his methods, and I'm going to talk about that with another example. Okay, he then went into Scholaranium and he solved questions, and within no time was he able to get to that 90 percentile ability. Okay, that's the power of data. So he took feedback seriously and he took corrective actions at the right time. Okay, so feedback, corrective actions at the right time. Okay. Now, you're more than welcome to read his debrief on GMAT Club, but I want to read this part verbatim. Now, this was his 3rd attempt. For his first, and this is what he writes about SD. For me, the biggest thing regarding sentence correction was the application of concepts. My concepts were not bad in attempt 1 and 2, but I lacked the knowledge of application of the same. Concepts can narrow down options from 5 to 2, but after that, the application of concepts play a game-changing role. And again, you can see that because he didn't prepare using the e-GMAT course in the first 2 attempts, he wasn't really sure how the meaning-based methods should have been utilized upfront itself, right? And that's the learning that he had in his 3rd attempt. Okay. All right. So far what I've told you is that, okay, most students, they get to 70th percentile ability when they finish the course. But how do you go from that 70th to that 90th percentile? How do you master application? That's where the cementing methods come into picture. You do that utilizing Scholaranium. And I'm going to take a look at Rohit Malan's profile here. Okay. He scored a 90th percentile. He has V41. He scored V41, and you can check out his detailed YouTube video, success story interview with Rajat. Okay, definitely take a look at that. Very interesting profile. Now, this student, he scored an average of 90% in all the application files, right? So he made sure that when he was learning, he was learning the method the right way. Okay, in only one of the 23 files, his score was below 70%, right? So he made sure that he did the files again and again so that either he got them right the first time, or if he didn't get them right the first time, he wanted to see that more than 90% score in all the files. I mean, that positive reinforcement is very important when you're preparing for an exam such as GMAT. You want to make sure that you continue to get that positive reinforcement, right? So he took advantage of that. Okay, now after he finished the course, look at the number of questions that he solved. He just needed to solve about 80 additional questions and he was at 90th percentile. Okay, that is the power. That's what I was talking about. Do you want to solve 100 questions the right way and utilizing each question as a stepping stone towards that 90th percentile? Or do you want to solve 700, 800 questions in an arduous manner without doing strategic review properly, not considering each question as a stepping stone? The answer is right in front of you. If you do things the right way, if you take the feedback, if you know how to incorporate the feedback, if you incorporate the feedback right there and then, when you come to cementing methods, it's going to be a rather quick thing for you because you are already there. You already have a very solid starting point. Okay, with Rohit, he had a solid launch pad already. And he had the right method, and that's why he didn't really need to solve those hundreds of questions to reach that 90th percentile. That's the power of data, and I want you to understand that. Okay, you have all the tools. You have to use these tools to make your journey to that 90th percentile a comfortable journey, an enjoyable journey. Yes, there are going to be challenges when you're solving that one question. You may feel, oh, why didn't I get that? But it's a lot better to question yourself, to be critical of yourself at that point, rather than struggling towards the end of the game and being nervous about it and ultimately losing the shot to get to that 730, to get to that 750. Okay, so once again, before I leave, I'm going to read this once again. In order to score that 90th percentile, you have to learn a step-by-step method to solve each question consistently. You need to use this method consistently to solve every question in that particular subsection. To effectively master this method, you need to have detailed solutions. Every time that you solve a question, I want you to ask yourself, do I have the detailed solutions such that that can facilitate strategic review that I want to do? If you don't, then don't even bother solving that question. You need to have this detailed solution. Okay? You need to have feedback. You deserve that, right? You need to have the feedback so that you can get to that 90th percentile efficiently. You don't have time to waste. Time is very important, right? You have that limited amount of time. Utilize that time in the best possible manner. Utilize the data because data has that power to get you to that 90th percentile. Okay. All right. So Rajat, over to you.
Thank you, Payal. That was wonderful. Okay, guys, with that, we now have come towards the end of this webinar. Let me just summarize this once again. What did we learn? Well, starting with, hey, that 730 score today is more important than ever if you want to get to a top B school and if you want to earn a scholarship. Also, the delta between someone who gets a 700 versus someone who gets a 730 or higher is upwards of $500,000, especially if you're taking admission in a top B school. Now, if you want to get to a 730, you've got to build your ability because GMAT's a test of ability. How do you get to that 730 in the most efficient manner? You need to build that personalized study plan. You need to understand that you start learning from the appropriate stage. Why? Because otherwise you're wasting time. And we also then delved upon the various stages of learning. So there's the 4 stages of learning, starting from learning concepts, learning application, mastering that application, and then refinement to perfection. And Pal talked about those. And then you also need to have that 5th stage, which is the stage of retention, which is maintaining performance. If you're an e-GMAT student, if you need help with any of these stages, we have dedicated videos. then if you want to get to that 90th percentile, you need to do a few things right. You need to learn the right methods. You need to learn all the concepts to a good degree of accuracy. And to do that, you need that precise feedback. Also, you need to do a strategic review. If you're an e-GMAT student, you get at least 100 points of feedback per subsection. Make use of that data, correct yourself, and achieve that 90th percentile. Make use of that solutions, the detailed solutions that you get. Do that strategic review. And then use the 100 or so types of quizzes that you can build using Scholaranium to make sure that you achieve that level of perfection, to that refinement piece that we talked about over here. Okay. And again, if you need help with any of these, you can write to me at rajat@e-GMAT. With that, I want to thank everyone and make sure you get to your dream score. You study well to do that. Now, a couple of poll questions over here before I do this. How many of you are applying in round 2? How many of you are applying in round 2? Okay, about 81% of you are applying in round 2. We have a dedicated team which can help you create your study plan. If you want help with creating your study plan, if you want help with understanding how do you track your improvement, write an email to us with the subject line crack R2 and then write to me at rajat@e-gmat.com. Round 2 of B School applications, which starts towards the end of December. Okay. The other piece which was there was if I can get some feedback on the webinar and the short answer part, that would be great as to what insights did you achieve and how did you like this. And while that's happening, if you have questions that are still there, I'd be happy to take those questions in the Q&A pod. And let me put in the files. Here is a session PDF that you can download. Okay, I have a question where someone says, the Sigma X mocks that you have that you mentioned, do they give me insights as to how do I pace? Yes, they do give you insights as to how you pace. Actually, they give what we call as an ESR plus analysis, and so you can really see how you pace yourself in each subsection in block 1, block 2, and block 3. So when you take the GMAT, you'd see the ESR has blocks of questions. You get the same analysis over here. It just takes that to that next level of detail. When you do that, you can see your pacing. Okay. The other question which says that, okay, let me just read this. Excuse me. It says, okay, you guys have this deal going on. If I'm interested, can I reserve this and buy this on Monday? The deal expires tomorrow, but if you are in conversation with someone in sales, then you can definitely write to them and ask them to reserve a token. That's something that's rarely to the discretion of the salesperson over there. I have a question by Kevin. Kevin says, I already have a Q49. I'm struggling with verbal. Can I get something for verbal focused? Yes, again, you can write to us at rajat@e-GMAT. We do have verbal online for $199. You also get GMAT club tests with that, which is something that we don't usually offer. Okay. Girija says, do you have mentoring services? I've been informed that you don't have a mentor services now. Is that true? Okay. Girija, that's a great question. So we actually started one-on-one mentoring sessions with our GMAT Live Prep program, which was sometime in May. And those one-on-one mentoring sessions were the goal really was to understand the kind of problems that people face so that we can really provide those benefits to everybody. As a company, our philosophy really is how can we achieve greater good using technology and data. So we did about 150 odd on one-on-one sessions with our students. And based on those sessions, we invested our entire July to build what we call as a GMAT strategy team. So right now, every e-GMAT student has access to that 4-person GMAT strategy stream. Each one of them has been trained on has upwards of 100 hours of training on helping you ace the GMAT and essentially give you the right guidance with regards to that. So that mentorship program is not cancelled. It actually is expanded to everyone who's out there. Pal, you want to add something?
I think you covered it well enough, Rajat. Yes.
Okay. So and that's something when we this team was formulated sometime mid of August. They've actually helped upwards of 300 students during this time ace the test. Each one of their responses is personalized. Avinash says, I'm planning for round 2. I have not started preparation yet. Do you think I can make it to round 2? Avinash, it just depends on a few things. One is what's your current what's your starting score? B, how much time do you planning to spend on this? And the third part is how dedicated you are. I mean, looking at the computer and studying is one thing. Being completely focused on it, not opening tabs in a browser is a completely different thing. Can people excel in 2 months? Yes, absolutely. So again, write to me with those data points, and we can tell you how much time would you need, where would you need to spend that time, and then the decision would completely be on you with regards to, hey, can you devote that much time? If you can, then you have a good shot at it. If you can't, then you probably apply in round 3. And again, there's significant scholarships available in round 3. We saw Krishnakant early on. He got multiple full fellowships in round 3, not just admissions. Okay, Nasir says I take a lot of time and to answer, I'm not able to complete the test. So Nasir, timing is something which is, it's, as you talked about, building ability is like building a skill. So if you've not gone through all the stages of learning and you're timing yourself, you're doing the wrong thing to begin with. So as you focus on building ability, the outcome of that would be that timing would fall in place. And so again, I can give you very specific advice on timing if I understand which stage you are at, if I can look at your course data, because you've got to ask yourself, why do you take time to answer questions? The reason you take time to answer questions is because you take time in one of the steps. Then you go down and say, why do I take time in one of these steps? It could either be because you're not following that step properly, or because let's say we talk about a critical reasoning argument, because your ability to visualize segments, your ability to visualize multiple statements together hasn't developed to that degree. So you're taking longer. And in either way, once you identify the cause, you have a corresponding solution to fix that cause. Okay, so the timing is a symptom, it's not a cause. Once you identify the cause, there are measures to fix that cause. Any other question, guys? Okay. All right, guys. With that, I want to thank everyone for joining me today. Like Nirmal says, does the deal contain all the things that e-GMAT provides? Yes. I mean, we only have one GMAT online, one verbal online, one quant online course. So it's when we offer them for a deal, which we do it once a month, which is going on right now. We don't really take things off now. This is to really say, to modify a course, it costs us about $10,000. Just there are so many touch points. What's Payal's email address? It's payal@e-gmat.com. So it's simple. Sahil says, I want to ensure I get a 700 plus before round 2, but in case I don't, how much does it cost to extend the program by a month? Sahil, it costs $49 to extend the program by a month. Again, 10-15 days, we do it free of charge. If you wanted a month, it's $49. All right, guys, with that, I want to thank everyone for joining me today. It was wonderful to have you guys. I know it was a long session. You guys really labored with me today, and it was a fresh session. Payal and I were designing this session till last night. We wanted to do something fun, so we said, let's do this. And it was a lot of fun conducting this session, and you guys have been really good attendees. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you guys on e-GMAT.com. Bye-bye. And have a good rest of the day or rest of the evening. If you can't download the session PDF, we will send it to you by email along with the recording in another 5 hours or so, Annapurna.